Hey, team players, welcome back. Today's going to be a great day breaking down all these big things for week 12 coming up here. What is the best attacks for your team in your league? We've had a couple of questions about how is it that we come up with our information and what makes us different than some of the other sites. And really, our key piece of information that we go off of is the betting markets, because while there are three general types of sites, there's the clickbait sites that, ESPN does and all the rest of them just click on a sensational story. There's the super, super analytical sites that seem like they don't even watch football. And then there's those that actually put people's money where their mouth is. That's what we go. If we go off the betting markets that aggregate all of the information and put us together, we then simply compound it and put it into a presentable way that actually tells us who's going to be able to do what for a fantasy football lineup. And that's how we go about in creating our information and our answers. So with that being said, we love all you team players. We also want to do a great thank you. Yesterday, we have hit the 900 subscriber mark, which for a site that's growing and taking off, we absolutely love you and thank you for doing it. And we couldn't do without all of you team players who come on, know what's going on, click like and subscribe, and of course have completely adopted and bought into the quick hit and deep dive system. And Jesse, every time when you let us know you're here, we feel the love and we love seeing it. So starting with the questions we got before the show even start. Dude, we were watching this last night for you, Jason, and I was like, dude, that CD one hit. This is the bet that I took last night. And the only part of it didn't hit it. The 4 of the 5 legs hit. The CD touchdown failed out. But Mixon obviously scored. Both of them got over their 80 yards. And the Texans won the game. Just wish CD would have fallen in the end zone. That one was juicy. But I only made that bet because of you, Jason. I was on the board with you, and I wanted to see it happen. So glad that it did. All right, better rest of the season, Nix, Richardson, or Purdy? I got to tell you, I am so far out of the Richardson bus. He's not even in consideration for your question here. I do like Purdy overall. And the reason for taking Purdy over Nix rest of the season is that Purdy's on an arc that Purdy is in a spot where his boys are going to be dropping. They're going to be scoring. With CMC back, it is going to be one of the best quarterbacks rest of the year. That being said, Bob loves himself some Bo Nix much more than I do. He's starting to progress, but there's a lot of limitations to his game that Purdy just flat out doesn't have. Now, you also can make the very fair argument that Purdy has a much better situation, better tools around him, which is true, but it also adds up to the same answer. Rest of the season, I'm Purdy over Nix and Richardson. Welcome to the party, Bob.
Hey. So I disagree. Of course, I disagree, Jason. I think optically that Bo Nix has a better pathway for a better rest of the season. They play the Raiders, the Browns, the Colts, the Chargers, and the Bengals. The Bengals in the championship game of your league. All of those defenses are susceptible. All of those defenses are susceptible to running. All of those defenses are susceptible to good quarterback play. While Bo Nix might not be the best quarterback ever out there right now, he's certainly come along over the course of the season. And I'm much more willing to trust him knowing that he has the capacity to also run in a touchdown, which Purdy can do, but doesn't do a lot of. The bonus for Anthony Richardson, and I'm not saying that I would want to start Anthony Richardson moving forward for many of the games that are left in the schedule. But again, it's soft as well. You have the Pats you have the Lions this week, Pats next week. Like I said, Broncos, which could be a little bit rough, and then Titans and the Giants. The thing that I'm concerned about is the Giants game, where there's a very likely scenario where the pass rush for the Giants could get to them. So I'm on Nix rest of the season, and I think I'm pretty comfortably farther ahead on Nix than I am on both Purdy or Richardson.
Fair enough. But I'm just Purdy. That's just the answer. I understand Purdy's schedule is harder but I also kind of think that with Shanahan, it's kind of defense. It's defense proof in that regards. I think that they're going to really take off. Also,
Jason,
Jake
I
Ferguson,
also love that you won. Joe and I were talking about that game last night, and it was not the fact that Mixon went for 3 touchdowns doesn't surprise me at all. At all. Like, I mean, that was just a great scenario for him. But in terms of quarterback or in terms of tight ends rest of the season, Disley's a reasonable target, an absolutely reasonable target to go after. Again, one of the things you need to be aware of with tight ends projection wise is that tight ends historically over the course of this last season, to be a top 10 tight end on average in a given week, all you've needed to score is approximately 10 points.
Yeah, we're below the 3 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. It's actually trunk. But to answer this question a little bit deeper, I do like looking at what the front offices are telling you. So Kincaid's injuries history scares me. And even before that, they really have been spreading the ball out a lot. It's been one of the weird things about Buffalo. They're really breaking their tendency in that regards last year compared to what they've done with Allen prior to. Ferguson, first off, it's just such a train wreck in Dallas with the quarterback position. I can't, like, he'd be third in this list regardless, especially before you add his own personal injury. But the thing with the Chargers is when they started this offseason process, they were one of the worst cap situations in the league. And with the exception of Disley, almost every single one of their transactions was left the Chargers. Chargers did not retain, Chargers cut. Disley's basically the only free agent they brought in. And if you look at his usage, they're using him now. A lot of this goes hand in hand with they're starting to let Herbert throw the ball more. But without a doubt, the best pocket passer of the bunch, and no offense to Josh Allen, is Herbert. So I like Disley where it's at. I like that they gave him, they're giving him touchdowns and they're giving him looks. And that passing offense is starting to open up. So rest of the season, my answer would be Disley, Kincaid, and then Fergie.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on Disley here. When you look at Disley when healthy, the targets are there. Again, I'm not expecting like a huge amount of points on a week-to-week basis from Disley, but the metrics are there, especially in the next 3 weeks, next 4 weeks, that Disley could get over 10 PPR points. It's going to be, the pathway to get there is going to be interesting because in a given week, it's likely that he doesn't. In the weeks that he went over 10 points, he had either, a touchdown or something go his way, or he had over 80 yards. More than likely, he probably normalizes into the 7-point range, which I think is okay-ish for a tight end. But realistically speaking, there's probably, he's not the worst out of the bunch that you could get on the waiver wire, but he's certainly maybe not the best of the bunch, especially if like Hunter Henry is there or Johnny Smith. Somebody's going to be there because the weekly top 12 of tight ends is a veritable who's who of names. So I am comfortable going Disley, but also one of the things that needs to be very clear about Kincaid and Knox for that matter is that they're getting enough volume to be a reasonably high tight end. They're just not doing much with the volume.
Yeah, and that's the disappointing part with Kincaid.
It seems to me, though, that that's pretty much the same story for all tight ends. It's pretty much, I'm getting a decent amount of volume, and if I get a touchdown, okay, bonus baseball. But last week, outside of the big week where like tight ends went crazy, these are the tight ends that scored touchdowns last week. Jonnu, Noah Gray, Bowers, Ertz, Disley, Jawan Johnson, Colby Parkinson, and the next 4 guys that I'm going to read, all 4 of them had a touchdown, but only 1 catch. Parkinson, Adkins, Yaboa, and Wright. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a shit show. It
It
really
is.
is for the most part. But I think Disley's the best one of the bunch.
It is, and that's gonna be our last tight end off to the side like that. Quincy, I told you CD was gonna do it for you, man. I'm here to hook you up, baby. I'm on the Quincy love. The only thing he didn't give me was that touchdown, and trust me, I was very sad about that. Steve,
Steve, it's
welcome
good to have
back
you
to
back.
another stream. Click subscribe, find us more often. We love you, team players. All right, ready for the playoffs. You own Kyron. Do I drop one of these? All right, so first off, why are we cutting someone, Quincy? But you have Pacheco coming back. Okay, so you have Pacheco coming back, and we need to cut either Corum, Algier, or Roshan.
No.
Roshan's the one I'm cutting. Looking at your because you have Kareem, I'm cutting Roshan.
Yeah, I actually think all three of those situations, Quincy, are really interesting to me. When you look at Roshan, getting some goal line carries has been pretty good for him. But again, I'm looking over the next 4 weeks. They play Minnesota twice, and that certainly there's a pathway that if he plays, that that they might be able to make it down to the goal line. I just don't see the likelihood of it.
Yeah, give me a scenario where they outscore either of the other two teams. And Chicago just doesn't get in the end zone enough.
I get that. But I also understand that, and I understand your reasoning for keeping Algier, because if Bijan were to go down, he is the next. It's not like if Swift were to go down, Roshan's volume won't be like electric, right? But Algier's would be electric. So
yeah, those are two top backs he's got covered here with insurance policies. That's how I want to build my back room. Plus, Algier's a decent enough flex. Like, you can flex him now.
He's not a decent enough flex right now, but Roshan would be the guy that I drop just because the pathway, like, he has playing time right now, but the schedule is not super beneficiary for him moving forward.
Arturo, trade J. Jeff for Lamar and JSN. Dude, I'm doing that one. I love getting Lamar.
Arturo,
some people tell me I don't love J. Jeff enough, but I love getting Lamar.
My only question to you is, you're probably in quarterback dire straits if you're thinking about doing this. But I'm curious what your quarterback is right now, because it seems like a little much to give up right now.
You better have a nobody at quarterback.
Yeah, I love Lamar. I personally love Lamar, but we just went over at the top of the show that Bo Nix, Richardson, Purdy, those are all guys that could be worth playing over the course of the next couple of weeks. Lamar's schedule isn't great right now. We just had Paolo trade Lamar for a veritable king's ransom of players. So I'm curious why you're trading into Lamar right now. I like the back end JSN because that's going to be super valuable for you moving forward, especially if you're in a PPR league. But I'm just curious who's on your waiver wire and who you have that you'd be thinking about moving JJ right now, because JJ, even with the struggles of Darnold, is still a top flight option at wide receiver on a week-to-week basis. So
but he's also the top quarterback. He's the top flight quarterback too.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
You bring up valid points, Bob. Start two: Pacheco, Hunt, Pollard, Tracy, Brooks, or Bucky Irving.
So Quincy, where I start on this is both of those Kansas City running backs would be worth starting against the Carolina Panthers. I think that what you will need to figure out is by Saturday, what is the coach speak? What are the other talking heads out there saying about what this playing time is going to look like coming back? We've shared on the show a bunch of times that I think that Hunt will stay in, but again, Hunt didn't light the world on fire last week or the week before, but he wasn't really asked to either. So I think you have to start one of the Kansas City running backs, maybe even both. Again, in the game.
Oh, Carolina, you're not starting both of them over Tracy.
Hold on. I'm just speaking right now about this fact, and this is a fact. You could go back and look at it. Both of the Atlanta running backs had great games against Carolina. So it's not
That's true.
out of the realm of possibility that both
But
Kansas City running backs could have a great game, but it's less likely.
In terms of total output, but there's a fundamental difference in Atlanta versus Kansas City. Atlanta already does a pretty consistent split between Algiers and Bijan. They
Not
always
anymore. Not anymore.
Oh, no, yeah, they do. He's still getting 40% of the action. Go look up Algier. He's still getting 40% of touches compared to Bijan. Granted, they're not all carries; they're touches. Kansas City doesn't do it. Kansas City is basically a one-dog shop, so you have to get that one right. And whichever one does it is going to go crazy.
So Joe, against Denver, he got nothing.
He was hurt.
Okay, so he's hurt. Okay, I didn't know he was hurt. I didn't know he got hurt.
Yes.
Anyway, but regardless.
Anyway, it's a mindset thing. They like running it in. So the answer, Quincy, long story short, is I want to go whichever Kansas City one you go all in and you go all in with. Going based upon San Francisco, they went right to CMC immediately. San Francisco, much more dire straits though than where Kansas City's at. But I have to feel that Kansas City is going to be wanting to do a get it right game. And whichever one they pick, they're going to run the ball down their face. You just got to get the right one. But I'm 100% going with Tracy as the other back. I think he's going to get infinite amount of checkdowns. They're going to run the ball. You can't give the ball to DeVito to trust him to win the game. It's going to be Tracy time.
Yeah, and I agree that I think Tracy's going to have a good game, but also Bucky's in a position where that game could be a smash for him too. I mean, the only player that I'm not thinking about right now is Tony Pollard and Brooks. Those two players I'm really not thinking about right now. So for me, it comes down to Pacheco, Hunt, Tracy, and Bucky. And honestly, outside of making the decision on the Kansas City running backs, I don't think you could go wrong with any of those four players, realistically speaking, because the matchups are incredible. With with Bucky's matchup being the top one on my board for running backs, the only question that I have is more so, what's the usage going to look like? And to Joe's point, Tracy's usage is not in question. So out of all the running backs on your list, Tracy and Pollard's usages are not in question. The other ones there are. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time to know, based on practices, based off of injuries, how those situations are going to manifest a little bit more.
So, Steve, can we explain the Daniel Jones situation? So, let me back into a core theory I have. These guys know how hard it is to find a franchise quarterback. And for really Daniel Jones and Eli, they would rather cling to one that's almost kind of maybe a franchise quarterback than roll the dice and be the Jets. No other way to say that. So they went back to Daniel Jones thinking maybe we can get him to be flat out a middle of the road kind of quarterback. He ain't. I believe he had like a 12-game stretch where he didn't throw a touchdown at home. So you add it all up, he wasn't good enough to be treated as the franchise. The Giants lived in their fears, thinking that he, not even he could be the franchise, so they knew he couldn't, but they were just afraid of what it would be without him. And as a result, they sign him. Well, at a certain point, when your GM's job is on the line and the coach's job is on the line, you got to get some W's. And it gets you a little bit of open grace by switching the quarterback. It just does. That being said, I don't think Daniel Jones is a Giant next year. If he is, he's certainly not the starter, and I don't think he's a starter anywhere next year. So when we look at this, he's basically setting him up to be a pretty boy backup forever, which is all right. People make good lives doing that. You get to do commercials with Dobbs and stuff. So that's always cool. But at the end of the day, What is his situation? He's at his best day, the 22nd best quarterback in the NFL, which is still ahead of Caleb Williams. And he's basically there forever. The bigger question is what's going on with Lawrence, who's in the exact same scenario in a much more fickle ownership group. So that is the long story short with Daniel Jones. He's done. He's never coming back until you see a quarterback go down around him with someone who values a backup. So here's the other part. There's only like 5 teams in the NFL that actually pay their backup quarterback any money at all. So that market is actually dried up pretty considerably.
And also to add to that, because I don't want to spend too much time on Daniel Jones, is that, when we look at him from like at a historical perspective here, there have been moments in which he has shined. And there are things that he has done in the past that were good-ish, but the mistakes and the fact that there has been less growth than what they were hoping for, especially knowing that they went out and they finally got him after many, many years of complaining. They finally went out there and got him a number 1 wide receiver. They finally went out there and supposedly built up an offensive line. They finally went out there and built up a defensive line.
Oh, no, they missed on their line.
I know, but they're trying to. They were trying to finally do these things. But this year, he still only has 8 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So, I mean, like, yeah, he can move around on his legs. Yeah, he has skill there. But when you're talking about a franchise quarterback having the same number of touchdowns as Gardner Minshew in a season, and at the same number of interceptions sitting there as Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, as Andy Dalton, you got to ask yourself, is this the future of your franchise? And the answer is no. And you saw that in the offseason. They went out and I believe they signed Drew Lock, which, I mean, Drew Lock's not a good quarterback, but again, you don't go out there and have all these proverbial backups and then in camp go, yeah, the job's kind of open, but it is kind of Daniel Jones's, but, we're going to play a wait and see approach and we'll see what happens. And, like, if he's your franchise guy, that's not like he should be developing. And the fact that he hasn't developed or hasn't changed yet shows me that, like Joe said, that he's not going to be there. And it's most likely the fact that they're probably going to go out there this year and probably get Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders or something like that and probably be back in the same position the next 3 years.
Fundamentally speaking, they don't have an offensive line and they don't have a running game. The Giants would actually be much better off of fixing those 2 problems first before they got at. So I just dropped Stroud.
I don't hate this. I don't hate it.
Had to send a message to your locker room. Won this week, but cut Stroud. The Stroud cut it way too close. Austin, I remember you had another stud quarterback. I believe it was Goff. So you don't need to have both of them. You don't need to have both of them.
Looking at it, Joe, looking at the schedule, Titans are stronger pass defense. Jaguars suck. Dolphins, the bye week's in there. The Dolphins are good. The Chiefs are good. Realistically speaking, other than the Jaguars game and maybe the Ravens game, you weren't playing them again.
Yeah.
End of story. And I mean, if somebody wants to go pick them up, fine by me. Like I said, the only time I would have started them again would be Jacksonville and then the Ravens. But Joe Mixon's probably going to run for like 5,000 yards against the Jaguars, so it's not even going to make a difference, just like we saw this week. Couldn't even take advantage of a good matchup.
So if you're going for 1-1, would y'all send T for JJ? Well, you're never going to get the trade of T Higgins for Justin Jefferson.
He'd be trading the pick plus T for Justin Jefferson.
It's a keeper league?
I assume that it's a dynasty or a keeper league.
If it's a dynasty, if it's an outright dynasty and that 1-1 is a true rookie, I would do that. J-Jeff, you can build around forever. J-Jeff ain't going away.
Mm-hmm.
T. Higgins.
But if it's not a dynasty, if it's just a keeper league, maybe
it's a basic redraft league. Unless you're going to get JJ to win your championship, which you're not if you're getting 1-1. I'm only doing. You know what? Maybe I'm not doing this at all.
It's for JJ and an early second. He's 8-3. He has Coop, Puka, T, Marv, Saquon, Gibbs, Benson, and Dobbins.
Oh, this is someone else's draft pick that you've accumulated in the past, and this is to go win it all this year. All right, that's a different conversation. Then, yeah, if this is to win it all this year, which putting J. Jeff with Koopa and Pook does that, yeah, I'm 100% on that bus.
Yeah, I'd do that in a heartbeat. If I can move T plus my 101 this year in a dynasty, because looking at it, looking at the dynasty league, you're probably going to get a couple quarterbacks coming out. You're probably going to get a bunch of decently talented guys like Hunter and Shadur and all that stuff. But the situations aren't going to be delightful. And the running backs will be coming out. I think that you're okay moving this pick to move into J-Jeff, especially knowing it's dynasty. If I can run JJ and Puka and Marv for the next 3 years, plus Saquon and Gibbs and Benson,
You'll have Cup until he retires too. I mean, like let's not understand.
I'm solid. I think that's
go win a championship. That I'm good with that. If
you can make that happen, Ali, I would do that. I have McBride to do. I keep Disley in case anything happened to McBride, or do I just drop Disley?
I keep them both.
Yeah, I mean, reasonably speaking, right now, we're past the. I think that many of the rosters that are going to come by have trimmed enough fat that it's reasonable that there is one other position of value on your team. So, like, your 3 wide receivers, you have at least, if you start 4 in a flex, you probably have 5 wide receivers, and one of them is like kind of like a little bit higher back end value. Tight end wise, I think it's fair that right now in the season, especially with the way everything's been going down, that keeping Disley and McBride in case injuries were to surface is a smart decision, Quincy. I really do. Since Fergie and Kincaid are out, last option, Disley or Zach Ertz rest of season.
Oh, Disley big time, dude. Disley is growing in their offense and becoming a more stable. I really love where that offense is going, where it's at. And the thing with Washington is that it's basically, first off, Washington is more like the Chargers than people think, and that it's a run first offense. Most people don't think of that with Washington, but it is. And the other part is that aside from Scary Terry, there's not a true line of delineation of who gets the ball. So sometimes Ertz will be the number 2 guy. Sometimes he'll be the number 4 guy. And with Disley, it's very clear cut. He's the number 3 target basically every play. It's pretty good to have that as a tight end in this league. Very few guys have that. So I'm going with Disley rest of the season. Like I said, and the other part is the Chargers are going to have to keep winning because they're never catching that division, and they're going to be constantly that wild card slosh of back and forth. There's teams that aren't going away that should, Denver. But at the end of the day, I'm going Disley, dude. Long story short, I'm going Disley.
So I like the amount of targets that Ertz gets on a weekly basis outside of week 9. Mostly every game has been a nice amount of targets. He's gotten a fair share of points on the season as well. Basically close to being a tight end starter almost every week, depending on your league. The one thing that works in Disley's favor is that Disley's next 3 games are very, very strong for tight end points. The teams that they face next give up give up a decently high market for tight ends, and Zach Ertz has a week 14 bye. So I don't think that I can motivate myself to move into a player rest of season right now, knowing that they aren't going to play in one of the games. So I think that for that sheer fact, Disley has the upper hand for me over Zach Ertz in the discussion because he's going to play one more game than Zach Ertz as well. So I think that both are good options, but I think I would rather roll Disley at least in the next 4 matchups. Once it gets to the Denver game and then the New England game, maybe I question it a little bit. But I think that both are strong options, Jason. I really do.
But you'll be good. So update from Allie. Allie says it was a dynasty. It wasn't her pick. All the more reasons to go out there and go make the action happen. Go win your league now. Can never take a championship
Quincy,
off the board. And by the way, thank you guys all for using the quick hit and deep dive system. We see we got a couple of deep dives that will be coming up down the pike here. So we appreciate all of that. So start 2, Jennings, Debo, Downs, Wicks, or Waddle. I'm going with the 2 Niners.
I'm definitely on Jennings. There's no doubt in my mind that Jennings is at the forefront of the decision-making process right now. Realistically speaking, I think it would be irresponsible to bench Jennings unless he were going up against, Quinion Mitchell of the secondary for Philadelphia, realistically speaking, Joe. And again, you might be encouraged by Downs' performance with A-Rich this last week. But again, it's still an untrustworthy option. And it's likely that maybe he doesn't throw 30-ish times a game. But the matchup is good. On paper, the matchup itself is good for Downs. So if you don't want to roll out both Niners wide receivers, Wicks and Waddle aren't in my discussion right now because I just don't think that they're as strong as the other 3 in this moment. If you don't want to roll out both, what'd you say?
So they're not. You're right.
Yeah. If you don't want to roll out both wide receivers for the Niners, just remember that the matchup is going to be great for Debo as well. And the question is that will the targets be there for him? Because that's been kind of the bugaboo all season for him. But that's the same question for Downs. I think I'd roll at least one of those wide receivers from the Niners, Jennings, and then I'd probably roll Downs. But, maybe I'm more disappointed by not starting Debo than Downs. It just kind of depends on how you feel about those players. Which one would you feel more confident? Because all 3 have great matchups. I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. The only question is, for me, it would be the volume for Debo, and then it would be the volume for Downs. And in that game, the Colts are going to play the Lions. So it's very likely that Anthony Richardson is going to have to pass the ball a ton. And those targets probably are going to go to Downs. Maybe they go to Pittman. So right now I'm on Jennings and Downs.
I'm not comfortable. They're going to be chucking the ball for their dear life.
I'm not comfortable with Downs, but I think that's where I'm at right now here on Tuesday.
All righty. So quick hitter, half PPR, Disley, Thielen, or Leggett. So Diego, this one to me is fairly easy. I know we just talked about Disley a ton, but at the end of the day, he's still a tight end. I'm going to go with Leggett just for the simple fact that he's going to do a lot more with the ball. He's going to about how Thielen is essentially on his way out behind Leggett and Coker. I think that that's pretty much the writings on the wall there. So I'm going to go with Leggett, Disley, Thielen would be how I'd rank those.
So for me, I think right now on Tuesday that Leggett, it really depends on where Leggett is going to play at on the field. If he's going to get a high amount of targets from the slot, Leggett would be a smash enough play for me as a low-end flex. However, I think we need to wait until probably about Thursday to see what the metrics are lining up. If Leggett is not getting a good amount of snaps from the slot, I think that Thielen would be the play because this matchup for Carolina is going to they're going to be moving that ball through that position because of the way the Kansas City plays their defense. So right now I'm on Thielen. It's an ugly play. It's not sexy at all, but if Leggett, I'd have to look at the numbers a little bit more, but if Leggett gets more snaps out of the slot, I think it would be reasonable to run Leggett because he is younger. fresh legs.
Perfect. So I'm 5-6. Thank you all. Tell me to start CD over Dell. Thanks a lot, Jesse. We're here to give you wins. We're here to give you championships. Let's ride this thing home and win it in all your leagues because you're like 7 leagues.
I love it.
John, welcome. Make sure we start hitting the quick hit deep dive, my man. All right, so now I'm 5-6. Lost by 2 points. Needed CD to just get a little bit more. Well, CD gave you a lot, dude. I mean, but the reality is,
if he would have got that touchdown, we'd all been eaten.
Hell yeah, we would have been. But 405 points. That's a super high scoring league. That is something.
I like it.
I like it too. Sorry you weren't able to have that one come through for you, John. Tyler, is it okay to start 2 people from the same team? Yes, it is. Starting point.
Yeah.
Irving and Otten and Cut. Dell or Downs for Judy. All right, so long story short, it's not a problem to start 2 people from the same team. We like it a lot, especially whenever it's a stack between a quarterback and a pass thrower. You can even do a multi-receivers in it. Like, I have no problem if you're starting both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown or Metcalf and
Irving and Otten. This
Smith
is not a bad play either because there is like a reverse correlation there with these 2 players specifically because, or maybe just a correlation at all, is that they're going to be moving the ball downfield in this game. And once they get to the red zone, both of these guys are options there. And I like to have options of red zone players on high profile passing teams, even though the Giants are, they have a decent enough pass rush. So if they could get to Tampa Bay, which I don't think they will, this could be kind of a headache, but I don't mind either Irving or Otten as a start this week. I think both are smart plays this week. In regards to who to drop, I think that the hive mind would tell you that it's reasonable to think about Downs because of the uncertainty with Richardson, but I'm not willing to right now continue to push that narrative in terms of a cut debate. But I also don't think that either of these guys are players that I would want to cut for Judy. I understand that Judy just had an incredible game this week and was forced targets by Jameis Winston. But we have seen Jameis Winston force targets other directions as well. And so I'm pumping the brakes on Jerry Jeudy. I understand that he's a great player. I understand that he had a great week. That week was something that most of us were projecting Tillman to have, and it ended up being Jeudy. So the metrics are there that it could be profitable going out and getting Jeudy. The only thing about Dell, and this is the one reason why I would, if I were to move off of either of those guys to pick up Jeudy, I would move off Dell because his ability or his capability of scoring is capped on a week-to-week basis by the presence of Joe Mixon, by the presence of Nico Collins. And statistically speaking, it is more likely, it is less likely that Dell scores a touchdown than Downs. And it is less likely that Downs could go and not be as involved, but Dell's uninvolvement is definitely something that, he was 5 for 54, right at average, 10 points. And if he doesn't have the ability to get that touchdown and Downs does, I'm more willing to keep Downs than Dell because of just the way that the offense works. And if I wanted to get Jeudy, I would drop Dell for Jeudy. I wouldn't drop Dell.
Okay.
If I
first off, I don't want to go Jeudy.
And that's what I said.
I don't want to get Jeudy. This long story short, I think because you're never going to start him, and I'd rather put up either Down or Dell. So let's jump into our first DD of the day here, Bob. Austin submits 2 questions here. First, rate his team. And second, is there anything I can do to upgrade my quarterback? Here's the roster. Goff, you're not upgrading that. Goff, Henry, Taylor, Bijan, Etienne, or Estime, Tracy, Amara, George Pickens, Tillman, Malik Neighbors, Bowers, Otten, and then Aubrey.
I wouldn't do anything, man. I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, I think you're set, dude. I love your 4 amazing running backs.
the
And
Detroit Lions have shown, Joe, and you've said it so accurately, that they're not pumping the brakes. They just beat the rails off of Jacksonville, and they easily could have brought out all their starters and sat them for the whole second half of that game, and they still would have won that game. And so for me, this is very much narrative heavy in the fact that, statistically speaking, the Lions are one of the best offenses that we've seen in the last couple of years, just for all metrics. But Goff, there's really not an upgrade that you could make to Goff right now.
No,
that you would want to make using any of those other players that you have. The reason I say that is that even though Goff doesn't offer you that upside that a Bo Nix or a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen has in the rushing market, he doesn't have to, because they move the ball downfield at an electric pace against most offenses that it doesn't matter for the most part. Again, he will have games where maybe he's not utilized as much. Again, on the season, he's had 3 games sub 200 passing, 1 game sub 100 yards passing, but in that game, he had 3 touchdowns. So outside of the Green Bay game where he only threw for a touchdown and less than 200 yards, you're looking at the rest of the schedule being Indy, Chicago, Green Bay again, then Buffalo. I mean, the skill, talent position players that they have are good. If I were to want to move Goff, I think that you could position yourself into a position to say, I'll give Goff and let's say Neighbors or Tracy or something like that. And the only guy that I would consider like a true upgrade would be Hurts.
Yeah, but again, with you having Ahmad, I don't want to get off the stack though. There's extra value for you.
There's juice
with
there,
the Ahmad stack.
Yeah, there's realistically nothing, like, unless you're going out there and getting Joe Burrow, which I don't know if I'd want to do that with Goff.
Yeah, that's not an upgrade over Goff at this point.
But it would be Hurts, it would be Bo Nix, and that's not really an upgrade at all. Or Lamar or Allen. But again, Hurts would be the guy, and you'd have to give up too much, and you'd be giving up your potential stack on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
I think your team is as close to a 10 as humanly possible.
Well, there's clause on that. At least I have a clause on that. If you're a league that requires 3 receivers to start, I think that you're about an 8.5. But if you're the kind of league that has 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 2 flexes, I think you're a home run. You're a 9.5. So it all, because the weak part of this team is your 3rd receiver. I mean, there's no way around that. And you need, I like your top 4 backs. You always should have an extra. So I like where you're at there with Tracy as being the extra. Cutting Estime to go get a receiver is probably the right direction for just general roster construction right now. But again, this could just be fear of Neighbors coming out of me, fear of Danny DeVito. But the long story short is, if you're starting three receivers, you're about 8.5. If you only need to start 2 and you got 2 flexes, that's probably back
maybe
to
what you do, Austin.
9.5.
Maybe the last ditch trade that you do is maybe you move Otten, Estime, and Neighbors to upgrade significantly at that wide receiver position, the second or third wide receiver position, or you go out there and you do like Goff and Otten and Tillman to move into like.
No, I'm not touching Goff. Goff's an untouchable.
I get it, but I'm saying, like, if you there's a market for Goff that if you're going to go out there and try to get a nice 3rd wide receiver plus a nice quarterback, you could do that. But I like Goff a lot. Again, I don't think you really have to do anything. But if you were to do something, the pieces you would probably be able to move would be Tillman, Neighbors, Otten, Estime, those guys. And you could conceivably, knowing that Baltimore hasn't had its bye week yet, I would never want to trade Derrick Henry, but if you are, worried about that bye week at all, you could move Henry and move yourself into and position yourself into something different if you felt like it. I don't think you have to at all. But I really like
you don't need to do anything. It's a championship grade team. It's very good. But you asked what we could do to improve. That's where it would be. So if we're doing a letter grade, A minus, B plus, somewhere in there, probably an A minus.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Back to the quick hits. Pick one to drop for Sutton. Hopkins. Oh, dude, you're not cutting any of these guys. Hopkins, Tillman, Metcalf, or McLaurin. All of those.
I drop Hopkins.
Maybe Hopkins are clearly above Sutton.
Yeah, I clearly.
I'm not dropping Metcalf or McLaurin at all. Like, they're no doubt. I'm not cutting that.
But again, I mean, clearly above. When you look at the PPR points on the season, Cortland Sutton is sitting at 15th overall. So
again, and Tillman's never going to fight with that. Tillman's all of those last 3 weeks.
The conversation is there. The conversation is there that the volume is there with him. Again, he has a bye week 14, but the next two matchups are absolutely incredible. Week 15, when you're entering the playoffs, is Indianapolis. Absolutely incredible matchup there. I'm dropping Hopkins in a heartbeat to pick up Sutton.
Yeah, that's fair. His volume does keep declining.
The fact that Sutton is on your waiver wire right now, like, I would be on there right now and I would be pressing max priority for Sutton right now.
Why do I always hate Cortland Sutton?
I mean, we were cold on him to start the season, and the reason was Bo Nix. But then week 3, he started to heat up, and outside he's had 2 games. One game where he got 0 points, which was the Thursday night game, and then one game where he got 5.2 points. But again, these matchups, like, the matchup is there for him to be successful. So, I'm dropping Hopkins to pick up Sutton.
Yeah, he's in a blind spot. He might be in the dark spot in my soul. That's possible.
Yeah, probably.
Right, what are the top 5 defenses to start this week? Well, Jesse, we're going to wait this one a quarter of a second, and you're going to see him flip by here. The only one we're going to add to the list is going to be the Steelers. So to read them off to you as it's taking its good old time, in order, it's going to be Minnesota, Houston, Rams, Jets, Steelers. That's your defenses for this week.
And you saw what I was talking about yesterday with the Houston Texans. I don't want to victory lap the Houston Texans as a defense last night, but all of they are so ferocious as a team in causing pressure and trying to get turnovers. The fact that you look at what the game plan is going to be against the Titans. The Titans are a strong-ish enough defense, but their offense is not. And there are going to be plenty, and they're trying to build up their offensive line too. There are going to be plenty of opportunities to make Will Levis make mistakes in this game, to cause fumbles. And I really do think that on paper, the Texans are a smash spot this week, as they were this past week.
All right, George. First off, sorry for the Colts hate. It's just truth. But I love you, George. I'm dropping 3 players and a defense for my squad. I'm dropping Love, Estime, and Knox, and the Packers defense. Okay. Which waiver pickup is worth it? Also for the defense, I have the Chiefs, Commanders,
Chiefs are solid
Tampa.
This week. Chiefs are solid this week. Chiefs against the Panthers.
Chiefs are solid this week. So is Washington.
Yeah.
See, we're getting to the point now where there's only about 4 defenses that are like a must start every week. And the rest of them are who's playing a crappy backup quarterback or a bad situation. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, you're basically, Denver's going to be on the list every week. The Steelers are pretty much there. Kansas City's there and Houston's there. Philly's about to get there. but the rest of them are all just kind of, blah. Like we thought Minnesota was going to be the be all end all of defenses. And don't get me wrong, they're right there. They'd be 6th on our list this week. But we look at it and say it's okay going through it. But of that list, Washington would be the one I would pick up first because Cooper Rush gives a great advantage of that. Correction. Kansas City is the one I'm picking up first because even worse than Cooper Rush is Bryce Young. And that is saying something. So I would like to know what your targets for your other ones are. Because, George, before you cut Love, you might be able to get a 2-for-1 using him being an upgrade piece on the back end. So I just put that out there as food for thought for you, George.
Yeah, and George, where I'm at on that one, as I do think that we need to know what your waiver wire looks like a little bit to make that decision. I think it's fair that Knox and the Packers defense are droppable. Estime I might hold on to, but again, that situation is going to be so frustrating that you're never going to play him and be comfortable playing him. And
Don't
like
keep
Joe
problems.
said, Love is a drop in most 12-team leagues right now because most teams have their quarterback situation figured out. And Love isn't going to move the needle for most teams. So I'm okay dropping those guys. I just want to know what you're dropping them for to pick them up. And I do want to follow up really quickly here with Tyler here. Tyler, I know that Judy has been getting targets. I do appreciate Jerry Judy and his ability to, get downfield and do what he's been doing with Jameis Winston. He looks like a totally new player. But what I do have some fear about moving forward is the next 4 weeks when you're gonna be potentially starting him. Steelers, Denver, Steelers, Kansas City. You're sitting there week 16 in an incredible matchup in Cincinnati. You're going to see him in an incredible matchup in Cincinnati. But then the matchup against Miami could be rough in your championship game. I do think, like I explained earlier, and Joe, I'm going to go back up here to Tyler's comment.
But Tyler, back to that point before is that you're going to be able to pick him up in week 17 because there's only 2 other teams who will be fighting for picking up a waiver receiver because the rest of them will all be out of your playoffs.
But Tyler, to your point, and like to my point that I just mentioned, if I'm going to drop a guy, it will be Dell because Dell is not going to be playing in one of those games because he has a bye week. And so I do think you have a good decision process here and a guy, and like Joe said, he wouldn't target Jerry Judy. And I do think that he could be a guy to target. But again, that schedule isn't the best for Jerry
You're never going to
Judy.
start him.
So that's kind of, but if you pick him up and keep him away from an opponent who could start him, it's reasonable to think that would be a good decision to make. Craig, my wide receivers are George Pickens, Zay Flowers, Debo, Calvin Ridley, and Josh Downs. Who should I sit or should I waiver for Ladd? That's a good question, man. Really, really good question.
See, I'd rather have Loud than Downs. No question asked. That's a lot of that has to do with quarterback putting the ball in a catchable position. That being said, Ridley's perplexing to me. His quarterback was bad, then he's good, then he's bad again. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to trust him. I don't know how to trust. Every other quarterback who has gone down that road of good, then bad, then good, then bad again, ultimately ends up crashing in a gutter. I mean, that's just what happens. So,
but it's not like the volume that we were seeing was other than that 15 target game. The volume has been there since the bye week, 8, 9, 15, 8, 9, 6. So, I still believe that Calvin Ridley can turn in some good weeks going forward in the season. I think, and I'm just going to say it, even though it's a player that I still do like, is that I think right now, even though the targets are there, but it's like a weird target share kind of happening, is that it really feels like Ladd is often a better play than Debo. At least, from what we've seen in games. But the targets are there for Debo as well. So like that doesn't
I'm not
make
cutting Debo though.
No. I didn't say to cut him. I'm just saying starting wise, on a week to week basis, I could convince myself to start Ladd over Debo. I could.
You're answering the second part of the question now. So after he cuts Downs or Ridley, what does the starting lineup become? So my ranking would be it's pretty much the order he wrote it in. I'm going to be matchup dependent between Ladd and Debo. But in general, George and Zay aren't coming out of your lineups. So
but here's the other play here, Craig. Ladd's matchups over the next 2 weeks are good. Then they go to Kansas City, but how will that affect him? Probably not as hard. Because he does.
I think Quentin Johnson gets shut down by Kansas City more than Ladd.
Yeah, he does primarily run out of the slot there. But one of the things about Downs' matchups here, Detroit, New England, both matchups that are beatable matchups right now. Calvin Ridley's matchups. Let me look into it right here. Calvin Ridley's matchups, I believe, this week are the Texans, which is going to be a tough matchup for him. Well, not for him specifically, but for the whole team. And then Washington, which could also be tough for him. Then week 14 at Jacksonville. So with Downs' bye week 14, you have to ask yourself, do you want to drop Downs knowing he has the two good matchups coming up? Or are you comfortable dropping Downs, keeping Ridley because he has that extra game in hand? I think that's the question you have to ask yourself there, Craig. I like all of the players that you have, and I also do like Ladd. That's tricky. I think if I had to drop one of them, it would be Ridley to pick up Ladd. But I'm not too confident about that. I'm really not too confident about that. Downs is in a lowish volume passing offense with a quarterback who can't complete a lot of passes. So there's that question mark, but Levis is in a similar scenario. So who should I flex between Odunze or Douglas? I also have Dobbs, Leggett, and Thielen on waivers. Joe, what do you think?
So, guys, I don't know how many times to tell you this. You guys should have traded Rome Odunze a long time ago. The only situation I actually trust the entire group is Dobbs, but he hasn't been performing the last 2 weeks. So I don't like this is the world we're living in, man. So the first thing I'm doing, Nahil, is that I am doing some trades to try to upgrade this problem so you don't have to make it. That's what I want to do first and foremost. We're talking about a flex, so you can upgrade either position, being backs or receivers. That's where I'm starting there, dude, because this is the kind of question that ultimately ends up making you not happy. Because A, it's not good options, and B, you have a 80% chance of being wrong because there's 5 choices. So what I want to do is cut your life down, make it easier, give me even a 3-for-1 trade, or 2 of these guys and a back, and get it better. So there's a clear answer to this question, because right now there's not a clear, obvious week in, week out, we start him guy.
So where I fall on this is Joe is absolutely right. On a week-to-week basis, all of these guys have similar floors, and out of the bunch, Odunze has, if Caleb Williams decides to throw him the ball a lot, he does have a yardage ceiling that I think is higher than the others. When you look at just what could be done, Dobbs has the potential to get that touchdown. So does Leggett. If we're just going on this week, I think the conversation to be had I just looked at Legette's percentages, and he does not run a decent amount out of the slot. So if that will be the role that Thielen comes back to, I think that I would have to lean on Thielen, just for the fact that Kansas City does not play slot wide receivers well, and that is what they're willing to die on, right? So I think that I'm comfortable just sticking with Thielen, but it's gross. I mean, Douglas and Odunze are on teams that don't necessarily pass the ball. Like they pass the ball around to different guys. And when one week you think it's like a Booty, then the next week it's Bourne, then you have Henry, then you have all of these players mixing in. It's a tough scenario to be in. I think I'm on Thielen, though, out of that group of players. Need one flex this week.
Oh, dude, we got to start catching up. We're 40 minutes behind on the quick hitters. We got to speed these up.
Need one flex this week. I think that, given the volume, I think I'm more comfortable with Bucky out of the group of players. If Pacheco were to have a setback, I'm definitely rolling out Hunt. So and
that's the answer.
In order, I'd be Bucky, Hunt, Tank Dell, and then Pollard.
That we got that the same. Awesome.
That's the first time in a long time, baby. The first time in a long time. Marlon, should I trade Breece Hall, Neighbors, and MHJ for Kamara, Garrett Wilson, and McLaurin? I wouldn't. I think that the ceiling for Breece Hall is similar to the ceiling of Kamara on a week-to-week basis. Neighbors and Garrett Wilson also have similar-ish ceilings, knowing the quarterback volume concerns and such. And so then it goes down to, do you like MHJ or McLaurin more? I think that McLaurin, notwithstanding the dud that came this week because of the matchup against Mitchell, I think that I do like McLaurin a little bit more. But also McLaurin has the bye that you're going to have to eat. So I'm not willing to eat Garrett Wilson's bye this week. I'm not willing to eat McLaurin's bye in 3 weeks. So I just stick with who I have.
That's all good. We appreciate the context there as well.
Yeah, Marlon, I would just stick with what I have. I don't think that you eating those 2 games for both those players is a smart decision right now.
So here's a good trade. Flowers for Jennings.
That's an interesting question.
It is. I have them very even.
That's a real interesting question. Ooh, that's a spicy one. All right,
I think I'm leaning Jennings because Purdy's more accurate.
I'm leaning Jennings. Leaning Jennings. And it's weird to say. I mean, I just remember us talking about Jennings with KJ a couple weeks back before the blow up game. And let's be serious here, is that outside of the blow up game, there is a possibility that he, could revert back to some things, but knowing that he has the X position, and looking at the matchups down the road, Green Bay, Buffalo, Chicago, Rams, Miami week 16, that worries me. That Miami game worries me. But the week 17 game against Detroit does not worry me for Jennings. And then when we look at Flowers right now, it's reasonable to say, and this is the thing, Joe, is that Flowers has that bye week coming up to week 14. He's probably not going to face Mitchell when they play Philadelphia, but it's probably going to be a rough go of things, except for week 17 against Houston. So where I fall on this is, I'm on Jennings, and I think you have to follow the volume on this one. Just like Joe said, I think you're tied to a better quarterback. Well, not a better quarterback, but maybe a more efficient quarterback, and you're following the volume. I think that that's an important thing to think about at this point in the season. If the volume is there, there's no reason to say that Jennings can't do great. I like both players, though.
Mm-hmm.
I like both players. So we don't have Joe and I don't play in any dynasty leagues together. Yahoo, I know a lot of people that play on Sleeper. That's where a lot of people hold their dynasty leagues down, John. Quincy, getting ready for the playoffs. My defense is Denver. So do I pick up Kansas City defense and drop Disley? I have McBride. Quincy, I think you could if you wanted to. I think you could if you wanted to carry two defenses. I never really recommend carrying two defenses. But if you like the matchup that the Chiefs have against the Panthers this week better than the Broncos versus the Raiders, then I would consider it. I think it's smarter to keep Disley, but if you were going to use Kansas City this week, then it would be smarter to take the play that you're going to play.
That's fair. Let's dive into a deep dive that we haven't hit in a while. We'll go back to Austin and we'll be our comeback for the quick hitters. 5 and 6. Thank you both. Who should I start between these guys? 2 receivers, 1 flex. Lamb, Jennings, Johnson, Harrison, Dell, Tracy, Pacheco.
Yeah, it's a good list to be on.
Those are first world problems. I do like that. So I love playing any receiver against Washington's defense. So despite the Cooper Rush effect,
I don't.
CeeDee Lamb is making the roster for me. The starting point. And then this is probably chalky, but I'm probably going Jennings and Pacheco because I think Pacheco's being the dog. Bob doesn't. And I'm going with Lamb and Jennings. Given the fact that they lost last week and they have a chance to put a get-right game going, that's the 3 I'd go with.
All right. I think
if not, it'd be Tracy, by the way. If not Pacheco, it's Tracy.
I think where I'm falling on this is I'm definitely on Jennings. This is a good problem to have, Jesse. It really is. I can't ignore. I mean, what we saw the Steelers do this past week, and George Pickens had a really good game. Little concerned about QJ, even though I think QJ can have a really great game. Just a little bit concerned there in terms of the way that they run their defense in Baltimore. That historically speaking, this season QJ has had issues here and there about certain things. So I think QJ is my first off.
Okay.
Dell is my second off. The Titans defense plays not to lose. And so they offer you limited opportunities, and most of those opportunities are underneath. And I think if I'm looking at floors and ceilings, you're probably going to see a ceiling again for Tank Dell somewhere in that 10 to 12 point range. And so out of the players listed, I think that there's higher ceilings for the other guys. So Dell's the next off that list. So I think then I can talk myself into Jennings for sure. And then I'm down to Lamb and MHJ. And while both have great matchups, MHJ misses the cut slightly because the volume isn't there. The volume for Lamb is there. Regardless that the matchup might not be as great as MHJ's matchup. But again, the volume is there. So I think I'm on Lamb and Jennings comfortably. And then in terms of the flex, I could talk myself into MHJ as a flex. But again, I can't pass up the potential volume that Tracy will get this week or the potential volume that Pacheco will get this week. My slight lean is to Tracy because I don't think that Pacheco is going to get a full workload. But I don't think you can sit Pacheco with the fact that like I said earlier in the show, that Atlanta ran 2 running backs against them fairly easily. So it would probably be Lamb, Jennings, and Pacheco, but I would monitor the health of Pacheco going forward.
All right, Steve, you will be the next DD coming up. Let's go back in these lines. I think we're on Austin, right?
Yes. So, but the second to last play when Cooper Rush chucked the ball and Texans had it for a second and then somehow dropped it, it won me my week. He had the Texans defense. Some people in here had the Texans defense as well. So, I'm looking forward to see if people who had the Texans defense ended up winning. Heart was pounding every time Cooper Rush threw the ball. That's rough, man. I mean,
I get that.
It is rough when you're like, and especially for those people that had Nico. Nico was supposed to be a smash start this week, and he would have been had they not called back that 70-yard touchdown that he had at the beginning of the game, which was
so rough,
just nuts. Jason, start to assuming Pacheco plays. Pacheco, Eckler, Pittman, Wan'Dale Robinson, Watson, or Worthy. So Eckler is actually a good play this week.
Yeah, I like Eckler.
It's strange to say that over some of these other guys, but I do like Eckler this week. Seeing what was just happened with the Cowboys, Jane Daniels has been hesitant to run the ball. Brian Robinson and Eckler are lined up for a pretty good game. I can't trust Pittman. Watson, again, I have to look at the numbers a little bit, but right now on Tuesday, I'm not on Christian Watson, even though he had an incredible game this past week, and I'm not on Worthy, but I can see a pathway for success for Worthy this week. Wan'Dale, the only thing about Wan'Dale is that with his incredibly low ADOT, it begs the question, is this going to be like a 10 for 35 yards kind of game, which doesn't really help you at all? So I think my lean out of this group of players is Pacheco and Eckler. But if you do want a home run, the home run sits with Worthy, I think, this week out of this group.
And that makes sense. Worthy has home run capabilities, but I agree with Bob there. Bob, we're starting to agree here a little bit more often.
I don't like that. We're going to have to change that.
Who was the one we were really fighting on like 2 weeks ago?
I don't know.
Revan,
but this is a good problem to have as well. This is a really good.
This is not a good problem to have.
Both of these quarterbacks are really good this week for just this week purposes. I think my slight lean, despite me loving Bo Nix like all the time, my slight lean
like way too much
would be towards Tua.
Okay.
Optically, the stats back up that both of these quarterbacks are probably going to have a good week, and they're probably not going to be varied in terms of what their output is this week. Okay. Tua, probably. I mean, if you look back at Matt Stafford game last week, there's a real possibility that if they can get Tyreek Hill open in space, that will be successful. The only difference between the Rams and this team is that a lot of those receptions are most likely going to go towards Achane. So depends on how that looks. I could see both quarterbacks easily passing for 2 touchdowns. If you want the bonus baseball for Nix, it's in the rushing capabilities, because the Raiders are not necessarily the strongest team when it comes for defending the run. So I think that the bonus baseball lies with Bo Nix. So if you're just going off of a passing number, Tua is your guy, but Bo Nix gives you all those optics that are good. So like, while my slight lean today is Tua, that is a very slight lean, and it could easily go back to Bo later in this week and probably end on Bo come Sunday morning. But I'm also starting and making DFS lineups with both these quarterbacks in it. I think they're going to have strong weeks.
Well, sure. That's just a volume play.
They're 2 of my guys this week.
That's Nick, a gross sentiment.
Top 3 defenses to start in week 12. I've currently got Denver. You just see it on the board right there. Minnesota, Houston, and what was the other one? Denver. I don't think you can go wrong.
Yeah, Denver's on Denver. Where's Denver? Denver's not a bad play. They're just a little bit more mid this week than normal.
Yeah, I mean, logistically speaking, I don't think you could go wrong with any of those options. Although you might get a Gardner Minshew garbage time somewhere in there. Planning to target Disley and Taysom Hill on waivers. Disley to use this week against Baltimore and then Hill the rest of the season. That's a super smart play, Nick. It's a really smart play. Setting Hill as the priority. And hopefully you're going to get those boom games like we saw last week. Any good kicker recommendations for this week? My kicker is Q and is on a bye. So if I were you, I'm looking at domes, because once it starts to get up, I'm not looking at any game in the Northeast. To be honest with you, we're getting rain, potential snow, wind, all that stuff.
Oh, it sucks up here.
I'm looking at West Coast. I'm looking for South, and I'm looking Southeast Coast or Southeast Coast, unless there's a storm coming through. And the teams that I'm kind of looking at here would be Cardi or Elliott from the Eagles-Rams game. I'm looking at Jesse Bates from the Lions in the Lions-Colts game. I think it's fair that you could probably trot out Jason Sanders from the Dolphins this week against the Patriots. I know those teams probably have high optics in terms of points for. If for some reason KMA Fairbairn is still on waivers, he's an excellent choice this week. I think that's how I land on that. Domes, West Coast, and South, unless there is a hurricane coming through. Oh,
have fun with your punters.
I got an offer for Higgins and Flowers for Garrett Wilson, but I don't know if I believe it's better to trade Flowers and keep Higgins. So you got an offer. You'd be trading away Higgins and Flowers for Garrett Wilson, or are you? I think it is. I think that both of those players are players that you could trade if you wanted to. Joe will give you, as he did yesterday, you can go back and watch that episode, many reasons why Higgins could be worth trading. And I could tell
you. But this is the right return. If you're getting Flowers in return for Higgins, I'm doing that one. And then I'm moving Garrett Wilson immediately thereafter. But I would like actually outright just a flat out Flowers for Higgins. The fact you're getting Garrett. Oh, wait, Crush, I'm reading this wrong. You're giving Flowers and Higgins away for Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't do that. I would not do that. If the form was in the other spot, I would do it. But you want to get rid of Higgins, but you don't want to get Garrett
Higgins
Wilson.
And Flowers. If I'm getting Higgins and Flowers, yes, I would trade Garrett Wilson. If I'm getting Higgins and Flowers, I would trade Garrett Wilson away.
Yeah, whichever side has Flowers is the one you want in that. He's by far the best.
From the question above, I have Kyler as my starting quarterback, and no one in my league wants a QB on the waivers. I have available Elijah Moore, Leggett, Benson, Pearsall, Roschon, Gus Edwards. I think Benson is a nice pickup, George. I do think that Benson is a nice pickup. Elijah Moore benefited from the situation this week. So I'm not too sold on him. And I do think Leggett is a nice pickup for, at least the short term, because he's not going to see the bench. So like you're dropping Love, Estime, Knox, and the Packers defense. You have Kyler. If you're okay rolling Kyler for the haul like that, that's cool. And if you're replacing those guys with Benson, Gus Edwards, Leggett, Pearsall, yeah, I'm totally okay with that. I like some of those guys on that list. Benson tops that list, followed probably, if you need a running back, by Gus, then followed by the two wide receivers in Leggett and Pearsall. Trone, better defense this week and rest of the season. I currently have the Dolphins and the Bucks due to their schedule. Should I drop for the Chiefs, Broncos, or Commanders?
I pulled up the schedules, but the Chiefs and the Commanders would be, or the Chiefs and Denver are the two that you're going to be having into this discussion. When we look at the schedule moving forward,
Chiefs is a definite could start this week. They have a strong enough rush defense to take out Chuba.
Denver's is soft. I mean, so we're talking Cleveland, Newell's.
Yeah, but dude, the Browns and the Texans are and maybe the Chargers could cause the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are a nice play for the next 2 weeks, for sure.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are too. So I think the Broncos are a great one to get you to the playoffs, and just know you're going to swap them out in week 16. Chiefs might, that would be my answer, because the Broncos do have their bye in there too, though. So it all depends on how much you want to play with this Trone. But both of them are better than Miami and the Bucks, and if you're keeping both of them, pick up both the West ones, and you're better off.
Yeah, but the Bucks and the Dolphins have a good matchup. I'd just be careful with the Dolphins, because there could be some sneaky Drake May touchdowns rushing, or something like that. The Bucks have a good matchup against the Giants, but again, Tommy DeVito could be, could be weird.
I don't want to hear no more about the veto.
That could be real weird. My squad right now is Murray, Barkley, Gibbs, MHJ, JSN, Kittle, Bucky, Moody, Love, Estime, Mason, Amari, DJ Moore, Hopkins, and Waddle. Yeah, I George, I really logistically do think that Benson is a great pickup for you. But Estime and Benson kind of offer like that same kind of glimpse, but Benson is definitely on a team that's committed to running the ball. So I definitely swap Estime for Benson, and I really wouldn't be mad about it. And then when it comes to those other guys that you mentioned, that I think it's fair enough to play around with that decision. Love, you can move for one of those wide receivers if you want, and that's totally up to you. I think that all of them are pretty good. Is it time to drop Dell and Waddle? Only here's the thing, I'm not dropping them, but I might be benching them for the future.
Yeah.
So while I might not drop them, because there is a potential where you could get a back half resurgence in some capacity, I see that less likely for Waddle, although Waddle's matchups could be a little bit better for him. But again, we always knew the floor of Tank Dell. We always knew this, and the ceiling for Tank Dell is pretty good. But again, the Texans are proving that they don't have to pass the ball. Waddle, and the Miami Dolphins are proving that they can pass the ball, but it's not necessarily has to go for Waddle. Unless there's another great option out there, I wouldn't drop them. But if there isn't another great option out there, I would keep them.
All right, let's jump into a DD here real quick. Steve, I asked this in week 6. It would be cool to revisit it now. Would you guys take a top 12, so first round pick in the dynasty? It's for us to redo the rankings, Steve, for Dynasty League right now. Fresh league. So it won't just be the rookies. If we were going to redraft the Dynasty League right now, and oh, by the way, he gave me the first pick. I wasn't ready for that. I'm not good with the first one. So it is straight, assuming a 1 quarterback league, no super flex PPR, who would my first pick in a Dynasty League be? It's gonna be Bijan.
Chase.
Good one. That's who I was debating with. Yeah, I gotta go J Jeff then. I mean, I can't turn off J Jeff.
Okay, hold on. Let me, Steve. Let me pull up a little bit of like rankings magic here, because I don't want to miss a guy.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss a guy that I have that I want to select. And anybody in the chat, you can play along with us too.
Yeah. What would your top 12 in a dynasty be? I mean, J Jeff's hitting his prime.
J Jeff is hitting his prime. I think I'd have to go Amon-Ra.
Now Moss was debating with. So yeah. Like I'm not touching a quarterback in the first round of a dynasty league. They last forever, and I'll get one later.
Not if the whole player pool is available.
Yeah, the whole player pool is available. Why not? So we're not doing this to build a team. We're just doing this for what they would be ranked.
Yeah. Just rankings.
I think Gibbs will be the next backup. I think Gibbs will be ahead of Brees.
Gibbs is there. Honestly, and it's good. It's Puka.
It's Puka then Collins, yeah.
Puka's a beast, man. Nico's up there. Nico's up there for you. Well, I mean, I still can't.
Collins is still young, super young.
I still can't get past CeeDee Lamb. So CeeDee Lamb at 8.
Well, yeah, at some point Dak will be back, so
they'll figure out that situation.
Yeah, they will inevitably. So the best back on the board is what, Kyron, right?
No.
Oh, CMC's still on the board. CMC would be the next pick. Yeah, despite the injury history, CMC would
and
be
then
the next pick.
I think you can't pass on Brees.
Yeah, I think that as soon as I think the Jets are going to hit reset, and you're going to have 3 shitty years of Brees. I'm very negative on Brees' future outlook after this season because I'm very negative on Jets. Period. So Mixon doesn't have JT.
JT.
Yeah,
JT?
I already took Collins, right? So it'd be JT.
Yeah, JT. And I think I would probably end it with I'd probably end it with Saquon, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
dude's a stud.
A lot of backs there. Yeah, the thing is you want to skew towards the players that are producing, obviously, but when you're going with it, you got to look at that downfield of I'd rather have, like, for instance, right now, this would not be a first round thing, but to answer your question there, Steve, would be if the debate comes up between Pickens and Higgins, I'd probably rank Higgins much behind Pickens just for the simple fact that I know there's stability of his situation, and Higgins could end up anywhere. I mean, if he ends up in, like, Washington, great, home run win. If he ends up at the Giants, it's like, oh man, I don't want that. So I rank certainty a little bit more in my situations, and that's how I go about that. So
yeah, I mean,
love it when you bring up those questions, Steve. Give me thinking about a different time frame.
I could also see myself ranking Achane pretty high. I could see myself pulling.
I think Miami's imploding for the future.
Well, I get that, but again, situations differ. I could see myself rolling a quarterback maybe in a little bit if I were in there, like a Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts does sneak into the top 12.
Any of the true 3 quarterbacks could start coming up. But the thing is, when we did this the first time, there were tight ends, no doubt, in there. And the only tight end I'd really even consider anywhere near the top 20 would be Kittle. So
I wouldn't. Maybe
I devalue the position a lot.
You're welcome.
The upcoming deep dives, just so you guys know, it'll be Evan, Jesse, and Revan. You going Revan today instead of Doge? All right.
Nihil, I don't necessarily see. We understand that trade deadlines have passed in leagues, and that is something that has happened. But I do think that from what you mentioned earlier, out of those guys that you're playing, you need to understand that Odunze's volume is predicated on how much passing volume the Bears are going to get. And the Bears, while the matchup is good enough that he could take advantage of it, well, they're going to be facing a lot of blitzes. And we'll see how good the line is.
Probably the hardest slate of running the ball. They're probably the worst battle in the trenches of their offensive line compared to defensive line. It's going to be really, really hard for them to run the ball. And the pressure rate, although it be slightly worse than average, I just don't see that when you put Caleb Williams in a pure one-dimensional game, that it doesn't end up being a disaster.
And that's why, while it's not a very sexy pick, I would monitor that health of Thielen, because if he ends up in the slot, it could be definitely a beneficiary of some stuff. George, would you drop Love for Brooks? Yeah. Sure.
Oh yeah.
I would with your situation, and I love Jordan Love. Anybody who has him, Georgia's situation is different. He has 2 quarterbacks looking to remove one of them from the roster in a league where they don't trade quarterbacks.
Dude, I'd drop any second quarterback not named Jalen Daniels. I would pick up Brooks. It's just a better positional upgrade at this time of the year.
I would pick up Brooks. Colby, do you guys think I should try for Pickens and A.J. Brown instead of Jackson Smith and CD? Not necessarily.
Oh, I'm very big on that. I like that, Colby. I like that.
But I might have missed something there. Am I missing something there, Joe?
I'm just looking at the two trading options of my return being Pickens or AJ Brown, option one, or door number two, Najigba and CD. I'd rather, if I'm starting both of them, I'd rather have Pickens and AJ Brown for the rest of the season.
I will say this. Jackson and CD do have a stranglehold on volume in Jackson for a high profile, or not high profile, but a high
Metcalf's going back.
Passing offense. I understand it's coming back, but even if it ends up at 8 or 9, that's still going to be pretty good for Jackson. And the fact that AJ Brown isn't getting volume on a team that is moving the ball and has shown that AJ Brown is still a valuable cog in the system, but the fact that he's not getting volume. If you follow the volume side is on Jackson and CD. But if you follow the potential for future touchdowns, because Jackson Smith doesn't super offer you that high upside in touchdowns, that would be in Pickens and AJ Brown. So it depends on what market you're playing in, Colby. If you like volume, the Jackson and CD side is nice. If you're willing to kind of float the boat and see what happens and go for the gusto, then it's AJ Brown and Pickens.
I'd go AJ Brown and Pickens.
I have Carr. He's on bye. So I have Minshew, May, and DeVito. What two would you start? John, we appreciate it. These options are not ideal.
No, they're not.
Going back to the stat sheets. Okay, going back to the stat sheets.
I think Tommy I'm just sitting with, well, here, let's look at the pressure rates before I dive in here.
Tommy DeVito, I don't believe, has thrown for over 150 yards in a game. He does add a little bit of leverage with his legs, so there is a bonus with that. But again, one of the things you want to look at with these quarterbacks, I would like, even with a decently high pressure rate, Joe, I think that it's fair that if they make Tommy DeVito run, okay, if they make him run, that
actually DeVito has a great pressure rate in his favor this week.
That he would be valuable. If they make him run, he will be valuable. So
yeah, of these three, DeVito is one of the starters, which is sad for the group of the three.
That's weird.
Well, the reason is that the Raiders are going to be in trouble. There's no other way to say that. The Denver defense is going to squash them. They're not going to be able to run the ball to save their lives. And yes, Minshew loves forcing it, but I don't think Myers can get open. I don't think it's going to happen this week. It's the best corner in football they're facing. And Myers isn't exactly the greatest, man beater as it is. So Minshew's the one I'm sitting. And Minshew might get sat in that game. I mean, we've already seen the propensity of doing that. So I'd give DeVito, maybe you get lucky. He scrambles here and there. He does do that from time to time.
Yeah, and May does that.
None of these options are sexy or good, but Minshew is probably the worst quarterback of the week this week.
I think that it's fair to say that, like Joe admitted, that all of these matchups are less than ideal. Gardner Minshew,
I don't think it's a secret I was trying to hide. That's just reality.
Gardner Minshew, I mean, does have potential, but you're looking at a likely scenario where there's going to be a decent amount of interception opportunities for Denver. Now, Miami, same situation there for Drake May. With Drake May, while the matchup isn't like super incredible, he offers a higher points floor than Gardner Minshew. So I think that where I stand on that is that I'm willing to roll into May and DeVito this week, for the sheer fact that even if DeVito is a dumpster feeding quarterback, he does have some mobility. He does probably have a good mustache this week. And the fact remains is that the Buccaneers pass defense is not good. So there is a likely scenario that I see that even if DeVito only throws for 120 yards, that he may get 2 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, it's not going to be a blessing, but it'd be DeVito and May. Bones, I think I would start them in the way you ordered them.
Mm-hmm.
I would start them in the way you ordered them. D-Hop's matchup.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Is nice, but we have shown that it is hard to start Debo. Or not Debo. It's hard to start D-Hop right now because the volume is weird. So I'm starting Pickens right now as we sit on Tuesday. Pickens, Neighbors, and MHJ. I can look into it a little bit more, but I think the numbers will back that up. If I do the Pickens trade, it would make it harder for one of the other kids in my league to win. That's right, with me fighting for a playoff spot too. I just don't know how I feel.
I'm all for that. Sometimes you got to look at the bigger picture, man. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I own AJ Brown, and if you would have asked me, which many people did 6 weeks ago, I was still flying high on AJ Brown. But seeing him after 2 weeks,
still am.
I'm tempering expectations, but still starting him every week. Start Tua or Carr in week 14. Good question. All right, let's look at
week 14. You dive into the future. I'll queue up the next deep dive.
Let's look at the slate here. Week 14. Where do we have? Well, as it stands right here, the play, and there's other numbers that we have to look into here. One of the numbers that I want to look into for you, Nick, is how well the Giants defend the deep ball, because although our check down king is here, he does have a good deep ball. Tua's matchup on paper is the best matchup probably that week, even knowing that Sauce Gardner is out there. The Jets are not a formidable defense, and the Jets do let up a good amount of deep balls as well. So I think my lean right now, as we sit here in week 12 for week 14, would be Tua over Carr.
All right, first deep dive in a while. Evan, 8-3, full PPR. I'm worried about down for the stretch. The roster is Chuba, Aaron Jones, Kamara, Dottle at running back, CD, Neighbors, Evans, JSN, Adunze at receiver, and then he has. Should I make a move? And if so, would you move? Who would you want to target into? Neighbors and CD are what's making him concerned. So
Evan, if we're being honest with you, I have some other concerns. But if Neighbors and CD are your biggest concerns, realistically speaking, it's going to be hard to get a wide receiver better than because some people, we were talking Neighbors trades yesterday, and some people had markets out there for Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins and things like that. So if you wanted to move off Neighbors and if you wanted to move off CD, you can. But again, these two guys are, while the passing volume might not be as high as it could be, there is not a veritable amount of difference between Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones. Let's be serious here, guys. So you look at it and you say there is a difference between Dak and Cooper Rush, but we saw that CD was fine. CD was fine. While he's not going to always produce that type of number, CD is fine. So I'm less concerned than you are, Evan, about CD. And you have less concern here with JSN as well in PPR and Evans. So I think right now, I'm not really concerned at all about your wide receiver situation. But one of the things, while I love Aaron Jones, and I do love Aaron Jones, what sucks about his situation is that with that second injury to the chest, his bell cow-ness, we talk about all these running backs being bell cows like Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, CMC. It went down. Last week. And, the murmurs are coming about, Cam Akers, Ty Chandler. So I'm also concerned that in an incredible matchup for Kamara that Taysom Hill got an excessive amount of usage in that game. I'm also concerned about Dowdle, especially with Cooper Rush being there. Again, Texans have a formidable defense, so I'm not as worried knowing he's your fifth guy. And Chuba is probably going to be the guy. They're going to have a rough matchup this week. So what I'm actually concerned about for you is the health of your running backs. So if you are concerned about CD or Neighbors, I think it would be a smart move to move one of those guys into a running back and a wide receiver. And to be honest with you, if you wanted to, you could probably move one of your running backs, one of your wide receivers, and probably upgrade into a really, really good running back or a really, really good, less problematic in your mind wide receiver situation. It all depends on how you consider floating that through your league. For example, people are also worried about Jones, maybe less so about Chuba now, right? So you might be able to sell Neighbors and Chuba and try to go out and get something that is going to make you more comfortable. I don't think you necessarily have to sell Neighbors and CD right now. But if you did, Evans and JSN are perfectly fine to have as a 2 and 3 if Evans is healthy. That's my viewpoint on this, because Aaron Jones concerns me from the health perspective. Kamara concerns me from we just saw Taysom Hill just explode on Cleveland, and Dowdle was like a non-usage kind of thing. At least with Cooper Rush there. He had value with Dak there. I'm not sure how that value sits, Evan, right now. So if I could move myself possibly into a Montgomery, if I can move myself into a James Cook, maybe I would start moving the needle a little bit in that direction. Maybe you feel more comfortable, and maybe you want to try to go out there and go for the gusto. You're 8 and 3. People are going to see Joe Mixon has a tough schedule coming up, plus the bye. Maybe you'd be able to pry him out of somebody's cold dead fingers. Maybe you're still looking at a guy. Breece Hall just had an incredible game, but maybe you still have a guy that was willing to sell Breece Hall after seeing a couple of those things. Maybe that's something you think about doing. Maybe you buy into the Josh Jacobs or the Devin Achans, knowing that volume could be a concern there in the long run, but health isn't one of those concerns. And then in terms of the wide receiver markets, I really don't think you can do better in terms of upgrading your wide receivers. I think that they're super strong right now. And if you were to take a downgrade, you could move up in a running back and take a downgrade at wide receiver. Downgrades at wide receiver being like a Sutton or Jawan Jennings or something of that nature. Joe, what do you feel?
Yeah, I think Bobby hit it pretty good. The fear of the team should not be the receivers. And quite I love that you're 8-3. Don't get me wrong, but you do have a little bit of a fragile build here. And you're fair to cite the fear of Neighbors and CD. But everything Bob just said is right. I mean, he just nailed it. So the one to go out and upgrade, like I said, I think Bob is correct. It's Aaron Jones. This would be the starting point for me, and that's where I would go. So that's going to be the answer for that deep dive there for you, Evan. Next deep dive coming up off the horn is going to be Jesse, followed by Revan and KJ. But let's get into where we left off down here with the quick hitters. Make sure I'm not missing anyone. Perfect. Would you guys do CD and Jackson Smith-Njigba for T. Higgins and Moody? I'd be getting the CD side of the deal. I'm 6-5. I screwed up my buys. I feel like I need a win to make the playoffs. Winning is always good. So I like getting rid of Higgins for a lot of different reasons, one of which is I don't trust him actually playing in the fantasy playoffs. So I really like the action here. CD and Jackson is good. This was the other part where we asked before and dove into it a little bit and got you the answer of the Pickens. I would go with the Pickens side of that trade. as we went before. Bob started this because he found the back in time answer to the question. So scrolling down here to the next one that we were at. To a car, we already answered that one. Downs, Tillman, or Waddle this week, and Dobbins or Pacheco. So when we look at the running back options this week with the make sure I'm on the right Los Angeles, so glad that they write so many of them. With the Chargers, it doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of space there running for Dobbins. The line looks like it's going to be kind of at a disadvantage. So Dobbins is going to be on my shade category compared to Pacheco, which his line should be reducing him an extra yard per carry. So that extra yard per carry really, really adds up. The other thing is, in general, we saw Dobbins' usage kind of minimize in terms of the big play bust, or correction, in terms of the regular usage. He still had the big play bust out, but his regular usage went down there a little bit. Of your first grouping of Downs, Tillman, and Waddle, I still do like Tillman out of that group. I get that none of them are like really life-studying answers, but Tillman's the direction I want to go with.
Bob? Yeah, I think right now, out of those three, Tillman is, I'm on Downs. I just can't get over the fact that I'm on Downs after every single little thing that I've said about Anthony Richardson. But there's just a slight glimmer of hope that
I'm very confused.
That maybe, I mean, and the only glimmer of hope that I have is because of the matchup. Okay, it's the fact that I'm looking at these matchups, and while Waddle's matchup is good, and Tillman's matchup isn't as good, and the only reason I'm throwing slight shade on Tillman and the Browns pass catches this week is because I do think that the Steelers pass rush can get to Jameis Winston. And when Jameis Winston is rattled, he tends to just chuck it and make errant throws and throw, hospital balls over people's heads. And I'm not willing to take that chance, especially on Thursday this week with Tillman. So I think that I'm more likely to go with another quarterback who is likely to throw hospital balls in a matchup that probably is going to have more points than the Steelers-Browns game. Just being completely honest with you, is I'm following the points on this one, Joe, and I do think that even if Downs doesn't have an incredible week, that he should have a better matchup or better week than these two other guys.
I just flat out can't trust Richardson. There's just no other way around that.
I can't, but I'm following the points. I mean, you look at that game.
Tillman gave us amazing points 2 out of 3 weeks. I don't see how I'm not.
That Lions-Colts game is probably projecting really, really high right now, more than the Steelers. And that's true too. They're going to try to have to stay in that game, and they're going to have to do that through passing. So even if he passes for 35 and only completes 20, that's still an opportunity that Downs has to catch.
Yeah, plus Thursday Night Football gets weird.
It's weird, man.
Yeah.
Ryan, Dynasty Superflex PPR, would you send Olave, Ayuk, and DJ Moore for Nico? That's a real loaded question, Ryan. But if I could start CD, Amon-Ra, and Nico for the next 3, 4, 5 years, as long as your Dynasty League is around, I'd do that.
Yeah.
Definitely makes you weaker overall if injuries were to happen. But that amount of stud wide receivers is incredible to have. I would do that.
Yeah.
That's a lot to give up, but I would, 100% do that. Jay, Adam Thielen or Romeo Doubs this week? Again, I'm checking the injuries for Thielen up until game time Sunday. Mm-hmm. And if I see that game time Sunday, that he is trending to playing and playing a whole complement of plays, I really, really think that the matchup is something that you can't pass up. So
And
that's
then for
something to
your
consider there.
second part of your tight end question, I'm leaning Kraft. I feel like the Packers are going to have to chuck the ball all day.
Yeah,
The
and
two of them really aren't
that's
that far apart, and I go to the metrics of more passing totally, just more total passes thrown in Green Bay game. I want to go with that.
Yeah, and where I fall on that is I think that Jonnu is also a really great play. Again, the Patriots do defend tight ends decently well, but the amount of passes that Tua is probably going to throw in that game is probably going to be a little bit more excessive than most games. He's one. I mean, he always throws the ball a lot, Joe. It's just that his routes are limited. So Kraft. Let me look at Kraft here for a moment, Joe. You can queue up the next question there. I just want to look at Kraft for one moment.
Fair enough. So, like I said, that's the answer. Like I said, Bubble queue it up to give you a big thing. No A chain, crazy. Hard to fight that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In our list, epoxy. Like I said, I could put A-Chan in there. I
want it,
but I can't put him over Saquon, knowing that Saquon's going to be in Philly for the next couple of years. I just can't do it. Kraft is a reasonable player.
Yes, Steve. To your point about that, that was when we thought it was a 2-quarterback league. If it's not a 2-quarterback league, I don't think I'm putting Jalen Daniels in the top first round. If it's a 2-quarterback league, he is the first pick overall.
Yeah, we were talking about I think we were talking about it being a super flex the last time, and I might have missed that this time.
No, we didn't do a super flex this time.
That's on me if I missed that. Yeah, if it's just a regular dynasty league, but if it's super flex, then it's definitely a quarterback.
If it's super flex, there'll be 7 quarterbacks in the first round. That's why we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got my league. It's 2 receivers, 2 running backs, 1 flex.
Yeah,
I'm not going to hit the panic button on Neighbors.
Joe, that's why I said his team is as close to a 10 as possible.
Yeah,
when you can run two wide receivers, 2 running backs out there, and I don't even have to be concerned on a weekly basis. Like when you're Austin was
Pickens is his number 2 quarter receiver. He's a solid team.
Austin was considering flexing Derrick Henry last week. So I mean, like, that is to say that that's a strong team when you can flex Derrick Henry. Would you go and trade Otton and Neighbors for Mike Evans? He also has AJ Brown, but I might need to get rid of Tracy. I think that's a little bit too much for Mike Evans right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you wanted to, I think the market is fine to move Neighbors into Mike Evans. But like you said, I'm willing to sit on Neighbors. I'm willing to sit on Neighbors.
And also, we talked about this yesterday about the trade value of Neighbors. Unless your trade deadline's this week, obviously you can't do this advice. But
right.
The perception on Neighbors is as low as it possibly can be. If there's any glimmer of hope whatsoever, he will exponentially re-rise to his projected real value. So this is the worst time to get rid of Neighbors. Possibly the lowest point to buy him with too, though. Should I grab one of these off of waivers? Watson, Addison, Judy, Dowdle, or just grab a quarterback like Baker or Murray?
Lipsy, if you need the wide receiver, and Tyler said this very well, the stats back it up as well. If you follow the volume, Judy follows the volume. The only concern that I have for Judy is the matchups coming down the pipeline for Cleveland. So if you follow the volume and you believe that Jameis Winston will continue to be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns and not Dorian Thompson-Robinson, then Judy out of those.
We just get super Comcasted? Bob, what happened here? Think we might have lost Bob, guys. We'll have to reset him here and see what happens there. Sorry about that, y'all. So, but yeah, to get into the question here, Lipsy, you shouldn't have two quarterbacks if you don't need two quarterbacks. It's just the fundamental answer there. So it then comes down to who's going to give you the biggest upside out of the remaining group. Bob's hitting about the volume for Judy, which is 100% true. When you look at what Addison could give you, he's going to give you a little bit more of the consistent yardage. So of that group, I'm probably going Judy out of the bunch. I've never really been on the Christian Watson all or nothing type. But if I was going to rank that, it would be Judy, Addison, Dowdle, Watson, because this is kind of the last chance Dowdle has to do anything great, and it's not even that great of a chance. So that's how I would rank that group overall. How crazy am I? I just traded the Hawk and 2 first for London, and I'm a contender. I now have Bowers, Andrews. I need help at the running back. All right, so with Terry McLaurin, that's obviously a good in there, or in a 12-team standard format. I think it gave way too much for 2 firsts for London before we even start talking about the Hawk in it. I can see it with 1 first maybe, but if you're going all in, I'm just not a fan of it. I get it; it's a dynasty league, so London is a young player who possibly you build around. I just look at it as saying, I think you might have overpaid there a little bit, my man. All right, let's see. 2-man flex: Monty, Devontae Smith, Jennings, Hawk, Warren. I feel like Devontae will have a comeback game this week. Let's see. I love Devontae Smith. I always have. So when we look at this week right here with the matchup, Philly is in a spot where, pull it up here correctly, they're going to be able to run the ball basically at will against Washington. I also think they're going to be able to throw fairly easily as well. So, but overall, Washington's defense is so bad. So without a doubt, though, we look at the group, you have to play Jennings and you have to play Monty. So I get the feeling that I want to have Devontae have it big, but there's reason to believe Philly is just going to Saquon this into submission because they can. So I look at that as a very real possibility. So I'm leaning Monty and Jennings for when we go there. Bob is trying to fix his internet world. Not totally sure what broke there. So trade your JT, Neighbors, and Otten for their Kyron and Evans. Also, would you be willing to add Tracy to the deal? So no, I'm not willing to make this a 4-for-2 trade. I don't like doing those as a general rule of life. However, on the surface, JT, Neighbors, and Otten for Kyron and Williams might be pretty fair. I like that you're getting Kyron back. It gets some of that risk of JT off your table. It's probably downsiding Neighbors, but I'm not exactly opposed to it either. Austin, I do think it would make your team stronger, knowing again that you only start 2 of them. I'm not opposed to that for you, Austin. Especially since you have Bowers as well. Where are you at, Bob?
Hold on. Can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you. You're not in your normal spot. It's concerning.
No, I am. I don't know what just happened with StreamYard, but I had to log out and it won't let me log back in on my iPad. Here it is. It's back. Hold on. I'm coming back on the iPad. One minute.
See you, man. Technical difficulties everywhere in the world. That's just a fact of life. When Bob said the weather ain't good in the Northeast, he wasn't kidding. That was about a kicker question in advance. And look at this timing. A lot of good kicker love there. We got you here, Nick. Let's dive into one of those deep dives that we haven't gotten to for a while. So, Jesse, on your deep dive,
there we go.
Would you trade CD, Tracy, or Pacheco on the high for Pickens and Monty? If I'm getting Pickens and Monty, I am willing to do that move. Yeah. I love Monty. And the thing with Tracy, as much as I love him, you've seen it throughout our answers throughout this day, is that, and really throughout the season, if there are two quality backs in front of him, Tracy just ends up sitting as your protection running back. And Monty and Pickens could be dudes for you for the rest of the year. So I think I'm okay with that trade. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, I'm definitely okay. There's a lot of things that are backing up that CD is going to be fine. Okay. I'm not as doom and gloom as most people are on CD. Joe is not either. If you're going to move into any wide receiver, the volume is still going to be there for a guy like George Pickens as well. And he has that deep ball capability, and Russ can get him the ball. So I'm not nervous about moving into Pickens. But Tracy into Montgomery is a huge upgrade for the sheer fact that with DeVito there, they might have more problems moving the ball into the red zone. And Detroit doesn't. And so when it comes down to it, while the volume is a concern for Montgomery, and while he is less likely to go for 100 yards than Tracy is, he is more likely to get a touchdown. So I am absolutely okay moving into Pickens and Montgomery. And I feel like this is a fair trade. You're giving a really good possible, running back 2 for the rest of the season into a really bona fide. I think that Montgomery now, I know a lot of people still have him as an RB2. I think that he's a bona fide RB1 in terms of his touchdown production. I know the yards aren't there, but again, he's on a clip where he's with James Cook and Derrick Henry in that same conversation. I think this is an okay trade. I would still try to kind of look at all my possibilities before I do it. But if I'm moving into any running back right now, I think that the Detroit Lions running backs are a smart play to move into. I slightly favor Gibbs this week over Monty, but I'm still rolling out Monty every single week that I have the opportunity to roll out David Montgomery, because the Lions just score a boatload of points. I mean, and when you're on a team and you're going from two teams, here's the thing, you're going from two teams that struggle to score points to two teams that have the ability and the capability to score to score a lot of points in the Steelers and the Detroit Lions. So I think it's always a smart decision to follow points as well as volume, and both Pickens and Montgomery have that. So while for some people I wouldn't say to trade Tracy in your scenario, I think it is very likely that this is a very good deal for you. What did I miss? Did you guys answer Dynasty? Did you answer Dynasty's question here?
I did.
Dynasty is my life. What did you say to that one?
So going back to Dynasty's question, I think he ridiculously overpaid 2 first picks for London. I think he ridiculously overpaid.
I think it is an overpay. I do think it's an overpay, but I do like the idea of moving into London after moving Hawk. And knowing that you needed a wide receiver help, I think it's fine. And Joe, this is the thing that you need to remember is that, the 2 firsts, you have said it yourself over and over again that you do not value as much as other people in typical dynasty leagues, those first round picks with all rookies there. So you're going out there, and I know you don't like London.
That is true, but there's still value in 2 of them.
Yeah, and I don't see a bad thing in it. I kind of like it. I kind of like it, Dynasty. I don't think it's that crazy, as Joe made it out to be. All right, Joe, cue us up on that next quick hit. Whoever is next.
So
I don't know. I don't know who you power through. Literally, my screen went black, and I couldn't.
It went black. Oh, that's a big time problem. The next one's going to be the deep dive here for Revin, and we're going to let the quick hits build up a little bit.
Okay.
So deep dive for Revin. 10-man, half PPR, playoffs starting week 13, which is not awesome. Allen, JT, Jones, Amah, Pickens, Bowers, Dobbins, Ladd, Jennings, and he was offered Minko, Marv, and Njoku. Do we get an update on that Njoku injury, by the way?
I don't think we got an update on that.
For Amah, Jones, and Bowers, do you do it? I like Jones and Bowers, but you were right about the decrease in his production.
But I'm confused, Revin. I'm really confused because you need to win this week.
Mm-hmm.
But AJ Brown still gives you the best chance to win this week.
Yeah, so does Bowers.
and so does Bowers. So my question, like, if I were to do this trade and I needed to win this week, Revan, I would want to go out and get a running back, right? That's AJ Brown and not Amon-Ra St. Brown, Joe. But still, one of the things that I want to consider here is that I love Nico. I like AJ Brown as well. But if I'm trading off of AJ Brown this week, you're probably starting Jennings and Pickens if that's the case. But if I'm trading off AJ Brown this week, I'm trading AJ Brown into a running back. Like if I'm moving AJ Brown, Jones, and Bowers, I need to be getting back, let's say, Marv and a really solid running back. I'm not doing this for 2 wide receivers because it doesn't really help you. Because Dobbins isn't a great play this week. He's an acceptable play this week, but he's not a great play. And Marv isn't a better play over A.J. Brown and isn't a better play over Pickens and isn't a better play over Jennings and isn't a better play over Ladd this week. So how I fall on this is I wouldn't do this. If you need to win this week, you need to go out and get a running back right now. Right now. And if I'm packaging pieces together, I think it's fair enough that if you were to move Brock Bowers with the type of value that Brock Bowers carries right now, you should be able to move Bowers into a top flight RB2 at minimum with the production that Bowers
and get their tight end back
with a weekly basis and get their tight end back. So like looking at potential matchups that you can exploit this week, even if you can't pull off a Bowers into a really good player trade, players that I would target this week for you if I'm looking for a running back, Revan, which I think you should, is Brian Robinson Jr. against the Cowboys. I'm also targeting Gibbs against the Colts. I'm targeting, and these are lower end guys now, Bucky against the Giants. And then, that, and even if you wanted to roll Achane because of his pass catching ability, you could probably put AJ Brown and Bowers into Achane and something else if you wanted to move AJ Brown, if you really wanted to move off of AJ Brown. That's how I fall on that, because the matchup isn't terrible for AJ Brown this week. It just depends on the type of volume. But I think it's smart at the very minimum to go out and get a running back for this week, Revan. And I think your league mates are going to know that and probably not going to want to do that. But I wouldn't do that trade. I really wouldn't.
That does happen. All right. Alrighty. So the next lineup for the DDs is going to be KJ, Jay, and Bronson. And let's get back into it. There's a couple of loves sent your way here, Bob.
I know, I saw that. Rip. Yeah, I don't know what happened, guys. Like, I was off. I was crazy. All
right. Better to own Carolina's Leggett or Thielen. I'm going Leggett all day over Thielen the rest of the season. And Dynasty and forever. Just period.
Yeah,
it's better to if you're having one of the two Carolina guys, which is a sad story to start with, but the answer is definitely got to be Leggett.
Rest of the season, KJ, it's Leggett. But I do think, like I said this week, whoever plays in the slot is going to benefit, whether that's Thielen, whether that's Coker, whether that's some other random guy that Carolina pulls out of the woodwork, whether that's Leggett himself. I think that this matchup does favor the slot position. But rest of season, it would be Leggett. Would you guys trade Jettis Jalen and Josh Jacobs for CMC, Terry McLaurin, and Chase Brown? PPR redraft. Current running backs are Brian Robinson and Josh Jacobs. Okay, so there is many, many ways to go about this discussion here. First off, Jaylen Warren is a good enough player, but has not shown anything yet for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, there's a chance that he puts up. Chase Brown is currently putting up. So right now, where I'm looking at this discussion is I'm trading 2 starters for 3 starters. That's how I'm looking.
I'm not sure Chase Brown is that much ahead of Brian Robinson
right now. I think Chase Brown has more work in other parts of the field than Brian Robinson does. But as a pure runner, Brian Robinson probably is the better runner. But more so what I'm thinking is that you're going out there to get CMC. And while CMC has had rather 2 pedestrian weeks, he's probably looking at that back end and be like, oh, I'm giving up CMC, so I'm definitely going to give up Josh. I got to get Josh Jacobs back. That's probably what that trade looks like to me. And you're probably like, well, I'm giving up Jettis, so I need a wide receiver back, so it's Terry. And then, like, oh, well, still not even yet. I don't think this trade is even. I would trade Jalen Warren, and I would trade Jacobs to move into CMC, Terry McLaurin, and Chase. So, yeah, I'd do it. I would do it, but I do, what I said about Josh Jacobs this week.
Which side do you think is overpaying, CMC or J-Jets?
I think the CMC side is overpaying for what they're getting.
Okay, so the fact that we disagree on that probably means it's an even trade then, because I think he's giving too much up with J-Jet.
Well, yeah, no, you are giving up a lot, Elias, with J-Jet. There's no.
I think J-Jet has more value on it than CMC side. You just said the opposite. That means the trade is even.
I think the accumulated parts of the second group of players is much higher than what we have there, because Jalen Warren is a non-entity when it comes to starting lineups. Every single other player in this trade is starting on a team right now. Jalen Warren is not. So
Chase Brown isn't going to start on this roster either.
He would if he's giving up Jacobs and he wants to flex. Like, what I'm seeing is he's probably looking for that better flex position. So what I see this as is probably
because Chase Brown isn't better than B-Rob.
No, what I'm saying is he's probably rolling out B-Rob and Jacobs as his RB1, RB2, and then he's looking for the flex. And Chase Brown is a better flex option for him than Jalen Warren. So right after this trade, he'd be starting Brian Robinson and CMC, and then Chase Brown in the flex, and then plugging Terry McLaurin probably into one of his wide receiver spots.
The Jettis' wide receiver spot.
Right. I think the point differential on a week-to-week basis is probably going to end up benefiting you more if you do the trade, because, again, I just don't know right now what what the comeback is for Jalen Warren. You know what I'm saying, Joe?
Oh, I think he could have a pretty big game this week. The fact that he's the explosive one of the 2 Steelers running back.
This week he could definitely go out. But I mean, again, it really all depends upon. It really all hinges on how you feel about Jalen Warren in that trade. I don't value him as much as I value the other three players. But I do think that he's a good player.
Here's another. All these Jettis trades today. This one from Sebastian. Jettis and Dobbins for Gibbs, Josh Allen, and Tank Dell. His current quarterback is Love. So he's getting back Gibbs and Allen and Dell for Dobbins and Jettis.
Yeah, I do that easy. Actually. Love is great. I like Love. But the question is, and Joe, you can speak to this too about Josh Allen. We both like Sebastian. We both love Jahmyr Gibbs, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be an electric part of the Lions' offense continuing through the season. Dobbins, his ceiling has now been cut with Gus Edwards there, but he's shown that he's still the guy when it comes down to who is going to be reliable. But he's a little bit more touchdown dependent now because the volume isn't favoring him as much. So you're throwing a lot of points their way, right? And my question to you is, what makes you uncomfortable about Jordan Love right now that you want to give up Jettis? Or is that the only best piece that they have to give up to go along with Gibbs to even out this trade? That's kind of my viewpoint on it right now, Sebastian. You can type in the chat how you feel, but Jettis does have a lot of value. I mean, it's still there.
I don't think I want to do that trade. I don't want to do that trade. I'd rather have Jettis and Dobbins.
Yeah, and I like Gibbs. But the matchups could be great for J Jeff coming down the pipeline. So I mean, when you look at everything, you look at finishes and all that stuff, how they finished. You know, Justin Jefferson has finished outside the top 24 PPR wide receivers the last 2 weeks. Prior to that, the last 3 weeks, he finished in the prior to those 2 weeks, he finished in the top 15. 3 times in a row, and then he hasn't finished as the wide receiver 1 overall. So the discussion is there that could be a trade. Joe doesn't like it. I like it. We can talk more about it, Sebastian. But my main question is why? What do you not like about Jordan Love?
So
Mr. Grapefruit,
welcome back. It's been a hot minute. 5 and 6. I trade Kamara for Josh Jacobs to keep my season alive. I got Bijan and Kamara on a bye, so I gotta win this one. I want a little bit more than Josh Jacobs in return because I think you can get a little more than Josh Jacobs in return, but you got to win too, so you can't be haggling. I get it. Jay, you'll be the next one, by the way.
Yeah. So I mean, when we look at it, the matchup for Jacobs is kind of just okay. It's kind of just okay. One of the things I want to look at something really quickly before I go through with this. I mean, I think you could get Kamara into Jacobs and something else, but again, that guy that you're trading Kamara to is eating that bye week. So the better question is what does the rest of that team have on it? I do feel like you do need to make a move to keep your season alive, but Jacobs might not be the guy. But Jacobs is a valuable guy moving forward, regardless of situation there. So, yeah, I'm on the fence about this one, Mr. Grapefruit. I really am. I would tend to lean into Jacobs and ask for something else back because Kamara.
Yeah, I think that's the answer.
Because Kamara does have a lot of value too.
All right, guys, we're going to plow through our final 3 deep dives, then wrap up with the quick hits. Jay is up. 12-team full PPR. Allen, A-Chain, Najee, Tyreek, DK, Kelsey, Tillman, BTJ, Hopkins, Roschon, and Bigsby. What should he do for his trades to upgrade this unit? So I think what you're going to have at the end of the day when Bigsby is fully comfortable or fully healthy, I don't think you're going to be having Najee starting for you. We've had a couple of people point out, Wumbo did it a couple of times, about how the Steelers are going to have a tough sled of rushing defenses aside from when they play the Ohio teams. So when you look at this, it could be an issue. Najee's never been an explosive one. So if I'm looking at your roster here, what I want to do is you have a plethora of extra receivers. I'm going to convert one of them into a running back. And I want it to be a hell of a lot better than Roschon Johnson. So what I'm probably doing here is looking around at someone who's not exactly pumped about their flex and offer them either Tillman or BTJ and Roschon in a 2-for-1 trade where you can take their number 2 running back, you give them Roschon back and the flex piece, and that's how I would want to do it. So that I'm targeting people with a really, really bad flex and offering Roschon and their choice of Tillman or BTJ for their number 2 back. That's how I'm going about trying to make this trade happen.
I don't think that's enough. But I think that's the right avenue to go with, Jay, here is to move some of that capital in your wide receiver market. Even if you wanted to, and I think that, I want to keep DK and I want to keep Tyreek, but I do think that if you were to move Tyreek, okay, and begin a discussion about moving in to a Monty or a James Cook, something of that nature, where the touchdowns are there, maybe the yardage is a little bit spotty, plus something to shore up that back end piece, and you can move Roshan if you want to as well. I think that that's kind of
Mhm.
the avenue that I would go, because Tyreek, while he has people concerned, the next couple of weeks, they're going to utilize they got to utilize Tyreek. I mean, there's just no question about it.
Mhm.
And he caught a touchdown this week, caught 7 of 8 targets, so the targets are coming back. New England, Green Bay, and the Jets, all beatable defenses through the air. So I'm not like as scared for Tyreek as I was, and I don't think I don't think most people should be anymore, even with the injury concern there. But I think you can net something really valuable there. The other way to go in is if you want to move, because I think that Tillman and BTJ don't really have a lot of Tillman more so than BTJ don't have as much value. Um, you could move DK. I wouldn't, because he's on a high volume passing team. But if you were to move DK and say, just make a straight lateral move, say, like, hey, I want to move DK. I need a running back 2. DK's a wide receiver 2. Let's make something happen. That's all a possibility for you to do that. You'd be looking again. You'd be a player looking at like a lateral trade into a Jacobs. You could try to fight your way. A lower end trade into Chase Brown. Maybe the Kyron owner is a little bit nervous now because Kyron has put together kind of like back to back like pretty lame weeks in terms of Kyron numbers recently. Philly, New Orleans, Buffalo, San Francisco coming up on the schedule, especially that Buffalo, New Orleans schedule. It's going to look nice for Kyron. Maybe you can buy yourself into Kyron. I think that is something that I would think about, Jay.
Absolutely. I think that's a good breakdown there, Bob. I love it. All right. KJ, better rest of the season running back stash, Cam Akers, Roshan, or Algier? You already have Benson. Well, Benson is a good selection as well. Of those 3, Akers, Roshan, and Algier, I'm going Algier all day, every day. He's the best player of the 3, first off. He might have the absolute best situation of the 3. And you add those 2 together, to me, it becomes Algier pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Akers isn't it. Not it.
You were trying such a way to figure out how to say that nicely.
I mean,
it's like you're a teacher or something.
It's really disappointing. It's really disappointing what's happened with Cam Akers, because I mean, he looked great at times during the games that he was playing in.
He
with the
hasn't
Rams.
looked great since he left Tallahassee.
But yeah, it's Algier, KJ, and the reason why it's Algier is that if for some, let's hope it doesn't happen, knock on wood reason, Bijan were to do something and miss time, the Falcons are one of the best rushing teams in the league, and they can beat you in a lot of different ways, and notwithstanding looking at the matchups or anything like that, just going based off the predicated concept that they run the ball, I'm willing to invest. I mean, looking at what's happened, even with the Aaron Jones injury, Cam Akers 10, 13 carries and still only 25, 38 yards. So there's not much push happening there for Akers. And if he doesn't get the touchdown, it just doesn't seem to be relevant to me. And there's some slogfest coming, Chicago, Arizona, again against Atlanta as well. But yeah, I think it's reasonable to say that the stash is Algier. If you're going for, the red zone targets, Roshan, you could talk yourself into Roshan, but I'm talking myself out of Roshan because I really don't think that they're going to be ending up in the red zone a lot anytime soon. So it's Algier from me, but that is purely speculative, but based upon the stats that they are a good rushing team because of Bijan, because they have a good offensive line to a degree. It's a better play. It's a smarter play. And hopefully you never have to start any of these 3 guys. But like Joe said, if you were likely to have to start one of these guys, and one of their and their primary starter were to go down, Algier would be the guy that already has proven that he can do it over and over and over again.
Yep, that's right. Last DD that we have in the queue right now, trade Geno, Brian Thomas, and Bucky for Joe Mixon. The other running back is Jacobs. His other receivers are Chase, London, Debo, Torrey, and London. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a position of strength and a position of need. I love it, dude.
But Bronson, and here's the thing: when you go through this question, it really depends on your record,
also
Bronson.
thinking of offering either London, Terry, Debo, or AJ Brown in that trade.
Say that again. No,
See,
for AJ.
I don't think you need to, Bronson. I think you get the trade through the way it's written instead of replacing Brian Thomas.
Yeah, I think I'm okay, Bronson, with this trade here, and there's a couple reasons why. One of the primary things I want to ask you is that, are you okay with your record? Because Joe Mixon has the Week 14 bye. So if you need him Week 14, ain't going to help you. So if you obviously even considering this deal, it seems like you are okay, and this is something that you want to do. Going in, Joe Mixon doesn't have the best of the schedules looking forward. But again, Joe Mixon doesn't need the best schedules going forward. Kansas City Week 16 and Baltimore Week 17 will be tough. Kansas City has one of the better rush defenses in the league, Baltimore as well. But we have seen that Baltimore can be susceptible to being overwhelmed by pure volume and being overwhelmed by small passes, right? So while the Tennessee and Jacksonville game are going to be stellar for Joe Mixon, you know, you're going to have to eat the bye. The Miami game is going to be nice for Joe, but the Kansas City game is my primary worry for Joe Mixon, because I do think that Kansas City can take CJ Stroud out of that game, and then it's just going to be Joe Mixon for 30 carries and probably like 60 yards and maybe a touchdown in there. It's going to be gross. But what I like about Joe Mixon and why I think it's very important to move into Joe Mixon is that if you're thinking about trading quarterback right now, Geno's not being useful to you, use him. Use him as a piece before you drop him. Brian Thomas isn't being useful to you right now. Lots of question marks there. Get rid of him. Bucky, super useful. But again, best player that you've got that you're giving up there. If I can do it, this is kind of a no-brainer for me, but only if I can stomach that Week 14 bye and, you know, and just pray that Week 16 goes your way. But he's definitely going to help you Week 15. So I would do that. I wouldn't do the second trade. I don't, you know, I don't think you, with the wide receivers you have right now, I think that AJ Brown gives you just as much questionability as all those three other players. While AJ Brown probably has one of the higher ceilings out of all those players, we've all seen all four of those players reach a very high ceiling at some point in their career. So
yeah,
I
do London for Brown though. I would do that.
I'm more likely to keep those guys. I mean, you could convince me to trade London and AJ Brown if I could rock out Chase and AJ Brown, but I like London's volume more than AJ Brown's volume, so I'm willing to keep London, even though AJ Brown's the better player.
Fair enough. Let's finish up these quick hits here today, Bob. I want to make another move. You guys tell me if it's a good move or not. Pollard and Pacheco for a top play. Yeah, I love it. The problem with it all in one is that in general, it's hard to get a 2-for-1 done when you're providing players from the same position. But you know, when there's a will, there's a way. You find someone who needs a running back and a flex, and you can get one of their studs in return. Yeah, man, I like it. I'm over pushing that. But what kind of top player do you think you're getting for him?
So I don't know how much you're getting there. Probably not much unless they really believe in Pacheco.
You're getting more next week for sure than you are this week, though.
I wouldn't do if my trade deadline was this week and I had to do it, I'd just keep both of them. But if I had the ability to wait and see what Pacheco's production was, you might decide that you don't want to trade Pacheco after all. And that's kind of just the discussion you have to have within yourself. Trading Pollard's probably a smart decision. In terms of what you could get for Pollard and Pacheco, it's like, Schrodinger's cat, like, I have two good running backs, but I don't know what it's going to look like. Maybe you trade them for a known. You could probably go out there and try to fight your way into a Jacobs. You could probably fight your way into David Montgomery, but I don't think you need to with those guys. I don't think you need to. Joe, and Elias added that. Up here that it's a 3 flex league, so 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 3 flex spots. So going back to this, I definitely think that CMC, Terry, and Chase makes your team stronger.
Yeah, because you play so many. Yeah, that there is something to it. When you're playing that many, there is certainly something to that end of you need to have literally the rosters filled. I mean, that's just part of life.
And Jay, we had you up there. Hopefully you stuck around.
Yeah, we're on Sebastian.
Answer there. And Sebastian, it's more because I like Josh Allen more than Love, and plus I like Gibbs a lot. So if you are getting these guys and you like them, and you are going to have more fun playing and winning with players that you like, Joe and I are always in on the bus that as long as I don't like a shitty player,
well, that's mostly on your bad judgment then.
Then as long as I don't love Alexander Madison, then yeah, I'm okay doing that. You are welcome, Mr. Grapefruit. We are here for the people. 100%. Is Purdy playing? I heard some people saying he's not.
He's day-to-day with a shoulder injury. We'll know more once we get later in the week with the injury report. It's just something you got to monitor.
Kind of make a decision about that.
Yeah, you just got to monitor.
Was offered to trade Pickens, Jones, Bowers for Nico and Njoku. I know we just talked about how I need to upgrade running back, but considering doing this, then making another move to upgrade RB2. I also kind of don't want to move off Jones, the 29-year-old with a lingering injury. I also kind of do want to move off Jones. Yeah, Revan, that's the whole point about Aaron Jones now is prior to the injury, I was all I was all in on Aaron Jones as a back. The injury took it out of him. Do I do this deal? I think you need to monitor the Njoku injury.
Yeah, you
because
do.
With Njoku playing on Thursday, he might not benefit you this week. I'm okay staying on Pickens and Bowers because I do think that on a week-to-week basis, Pickens and Bowers has the chance to put up just the same amount of points as the 2 players you're going into. So while I
don't think I'm doing that trade. I think I want to get something. If you're either figure out how to get Bowers out of it, because if you can do that trade with just Pickens and Jones for Collins, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, if I
don't like Bowers and Njoku in it.
Even if I can offer some back end piece of Pickens, Jones, and something else for Nico, I would want to do that. If I have to move Bowers, and the question is, I would ask your league mate, is he doing this trade because he wants Bowers, or is he doing this trade because he wants Pickens? Because if it's Bowers and Jones for Nico, okay.
I think I actually like that more.
And he's floating you Njoku because he's getting Bowers back. That's the question that I have in my mind, because Bowers and Jones are better than Njoku. And I think they're equal enough value to Nico with the way that Bowers has been playing. So that's the kind of question that I have for you, Revan. So that's something to think about. And it's concerning.
All right, we'll get to your quick hitter here last.
Starting one wide receiver flex, one player: Juwan Jennings, D-Hop, JSN Sutton, Tyrone Tracy. So Koo, where we're at right now, my tentative Tuesday take on this is I'm starting Juwan Jennings, and I'm probably starting JSN.
And I'm going Tracy as the flex.
My tentative play there is Juwan Jennings and Jason. I could easily talk myself into Tracy, though. Traded Flowers for Jennings. I love that. Lineup this week would be Goff, Gibbs, Puka, Jacobs, Jennings, Kelsey, and Connor. Benches London, Higgins, Burrow on bye. Pollard, Ridley, Waddle, Pacheco, and IR. You're going to be
Okay, so all for one, you wanted to do a trade before to make it awesome. Do Higgins and Pollard. That will get you a top or that will get you a top flight guy. That's what you do. Do Higgins and Pollard to go get a dude.
That will get you a really top flight guy right now, especially with the Higgins performance. So if you like Higgins, I don't see a place necessarily for Higgins in your lineup, but the Burrow-Higgins stack is nice. The Burrow-Higgins stack is nice, but you got...
Or even better, do Higgins and Connor and go get Gibbs.
Or he already has Gibbs. You go get
get them all. Go get all Detroit. Get all of your stacks. Go get Detroit. Go get them all.
Jacob, drop Ertz for Jonnu Smith. Need a bye week fill-in PPR. Yeah, it's reasonable.
That's acceptable.
Jonnu has a good enough matchup. I think that after scoring 28 PPR points last week, that he's 28 FanDuel points last week, that he is definitely worth considering. Koo, if you got a feeling about Tracy, the stats back up that Tracy's going to have a good enough game, absolutely roll with him. Just trade it. And the thing is, when we make these start decision trades and you're making them for your own team, if the optics back up that that's a good choice, and even if that player doesn't perform, the stats were sound, right? There's no reason.
Here's a lot over the course of the season. We know so many people joined us as the year went on, but over the course of the season, you'll hear us say, especially once you get done with September, start trading your decisions away. If you got to make a call between three guys, trade them. Make your life easier. So you don't have to keep making hard decisions as the year goes on. Like I said, that's what October is made for, trading time. So you just traded Dobbins and Tillman for AJ Brown. Yeah, love it. That's what we're talking about.
AT especially with the volume, with Dobbins being a concern and Tillman's volume guaranteed, but not necessarily being so great all the time. I think this is an incredible move. You just upgraded your wide receiver market. You're moving on from Waddle, Coleman. You don't have to make that decision anymore. Yeah, dude, 10 out of 10 would do again. Luke's last question.
All right, for the last one of the day, Luke
will be on tomorrow, 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. Luke, I'm last in my 10.
And it's already in there, so you can put your questions in there for tomorrow's conversation. We'll start the show with them.
All in one, yes. Offer Higgins and Pollard for St. Brown. It might not get accepted after his great week, but you can try. I need to win. Have the points tiebreaker. My team is Jaden Daniels, Kareem Hunt, Monty, Ladd, MHJ, Laporta, Tyrone, Tracy, Bijan, Mooney. What wide receiver should I be targeting for Bijan over the last 3 weeks?
You're talking Bijan. You got to get Chase. You got to get Chase or Amah.
Yeah.
To me, that's where it's at. If that's what you're doing, that's where you're at.
So as I look at it, I do wholeheartedly agree with Joe on this. And so, Joe, which one do you want?
Amah.
Okay. Give him a reason. Why Amon-Ra? Why?
Because Cincinnati's basically thrown their entire soul in and they keep losing. And at some point you crack and you stop wanting to play that game. And that's what I worry about Chase not finishing ahead of Amah when it's all said and done. Detroit learned 2 weeks ago that if we don't give Amah the ball, we have problems. So guess what? They're going to give the ball Amah a lot. I think Detroit's the best offense in football, and that's why I wanted to have their team captain of.
And Luke, realistically speaking, Joe's absolutely 1,000% correct. If I'm trading out of Bijan with the massive weeks that he's had over the last several weeks, and granted last week wasn't as great, but when you look at the rest of season schedule for Bijan, it's really hard to move off of him, knowing that, Vegas, Giants, and Washington are there. But again, the Chargers and Minnesota might concern you. So it's reasonable to think that is going to be a really stellar move. You might have to add some juice in, and you might, and right now Hunt is a great enough start. If he is the guy that has the whole role, like I think he will have. But yeah, I'm selling Bijan for Amon-Ra. I don't know if you could, though. That's the question. You could probably move him into Chase because people will be worried about Chase's schedule. But realistically speaking, those two guys would probably be the only two wide receivers that I would want if I'm trading Bijan Robinson. You'd have to offer me like 4 other wide receivers for Bijan Robinson right now, and a couple of them you already have on your team. So realistically speaking, this is going to be a hard trade for you to get done. Back end pieces, though, Joe, that are of interest to us, which is not a direct trade, right, would be George Pickens, for sure, would be a guy to target. A.J. Brown could be a guy to target. Both players have different values. Tyreek Hill would be a guy that if you want to go.
I don't want Tyreek at all.
And
I get it. What your probably best bet, Luke, to make this trade happen.
I also like
is
Cooper
to go
Kupp.
to half a notch down
Cooper
and
Kupp
do a
and
2-for-1.
Cooper Kupp.
Go
and Puka.
get Kupp or not get Cook, and either one of the Rams receivers are fine. That's fair. Metcalf is fine. That them with a quality back, you're going to need a return to get this home. So that's how I would look at this.
This one right here could get it done. Bijan and Mooney. There's enough production there to make the person less scared. They're eating the bye. I like this.
I'm all for that, but you are going to need to go buy another running back though, because you can't rely on.
Let us know tomorrow, Luke, if you get this trade done, or on Thursday. We'll be on tomorrow and Thursday, starting at 3:45 Eastern time. The show on Thursday is going to be a little bit shorter because we have some things to take care of in the home environment. So, team players, thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow, 3:45.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL.